Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to be fully awake, but to watch your body rot? To breathe normally while your skin melts away like wax near a candle? Some say this is a myth, but history has hidden cases of kings and emperors whose flesh decayed while they were still alive. Was it a punishment? A medical mystery? Or something worse, something no one wanted to explain? Before we begin tonight's story, take a moment to settle in. Where are you listening from? Is it nighttime where you are? Or early morning before the birds begin to sing? Let me know in the comments. And once you've shared, gently close your eyes, stretch your legs, and lie down comfortably. This is your time to rest, while the past slowly drifts over you like a quiet tide. If you enjoy these strange and forgotten stories from History Soft Tailies that you've never heard before, consider subscribing to this channel. This is your calm place for the kind of history that doesn't usually make it into textbooks, the kind that sits quietly in the corners of forgotten bookshelves, waiting for someone like you to find it before sleep. Let's go back now. Not just back in time, but back into a room that most people would refuse to enter, even in a dream. It's the year 1494. The royal court of France glows with candlelight. Outside, the Parisian streets are damp, cold, and filled with the soft sounds of horses' hooves in the distance. But inside the Château de Plessis-les-Tours, behind thick curtains embroidered with golden lily, a strange and terrifying scene is unfolding. King Charles VIII lies in his chamber, awake but shivering. His eyes flicker toward the ceiling. Beams, the air smells different tonight. Not just of wax or old stone, but of something sour, something that shouldn't be here. At first, the doctors think it's an infection. After all, in this era, sickness is everywhere: plague, smallpox, gangrene. But this is something new, something the royal physicians don't have a name for. The king's skin is changing. His feet, his legs, parts of his arms. The flesh is softening, then breaking apart. Not like a wound, not like a cut. It's as if his body is dissolving while his heart still beats. His attendants stand at the edge of the room, silent. One of them holds a cloth soaked in herbs, pressing it to his nose to keep from gagging. The smell is indescribable, sweet and rotten at the same time, like meat left too long in the sun, but mixed with perfume. The queen refuses to come closer. She stays behind the heavy curtains that separate the royal bed from the rest of the chamber. Behind the scenes, the doctors write notes in Latin, hoping the church won't read them. They use words like corpus vivum putrefactum, the living body rotting. Some believe it's a punishment from God. Others think it's leprosy. But leprosy works slowly over the years. This is happening in days. One physician whispers to another, could it be a curse? The king was involved in strange politics this year. He made a deal with Milan, then with the Pope, then broke it. Some say he angered the wrong people. In Renaissance Europe, curses weren't just superstition. They were political weapons. But then there's another problem. If this is a curse, why does it match certain rare diseases written about in ancient texts? An old monk brings a parchment from a dusty library. It tells of King Herod Agrippa, a ruler in the 1st century who is said to have died while still alive, his flesh consumed by worms before his heart stopped beating. Another scroll speaks of Sigismund of Burgundy in the 6th century, whose skin decayed rapidly before death. Could this be the same? Or is there something even stranger at work? Outside the palace, rumors begin to spread. The people of France whisper that their king is turning into a ghost while still wearing his crown. They say the angels have abandoned him. Some even claim to see shadows moving in his windows at night. The doctors try everything. They cover the king in poultices made of honey, thinking the sweetness might preserve his skin. They apply crushed pearls to his sores, a medieval luxury remedy. They even try gold leaf mixed with oil, thinking it will stop the decay. But nothing works. The king lies there, eyes open, his lips moving in silent prayer. And yet his body continues to collapse from the outside in. But what happens next is even stranger. A group of alchemists is summoned from Florence. They bring with them a secret mixture, an ancient liquid called aqua chrysopoeia. It's said to combine snake venom, molten, gold dissolved in mercury, and rare herbs from the mountains of Anatolia. They believe it will reverse the process, not just stop the rot, but make the flesh whole again. The mixture glows faintly in the dark, like moonlight in a bottle. They rub it onto the king's skin, murmuring in Latin, calling upon powers they refuse to name out loud. For a moment, the bleeding slows. The sores seal just a little. But then something happens that no one expects. The king begins to speak, but not in French, not in Latin. His lips form words in an ancient language no one recognizes, his voice soft but clear, as if he's reading from a forgotten script written centuries before. His eyes remain wide open, and tears fall silently onto the pillow beneath his head. Outside, the night grows colder. The guards at the palace gates shift nervously, feeling an unease they can't explain. The candlelight flickers, and the smell of rotting flesh continues to hover in the royal chambers, soft as mist. But there is something else now a feeling, that the room itself has become detached from time, as if the walls are listening, as if history is folding in on itself. But what happened after that was even more bizarre. And in part 2, you'll hear the secret the alchemists discovered, one that would disappear from the records for over 400 years. For now, close your eyes. Imagine you are outside that chamber, standing quietly in the cold, listening to the soft winds of the French night. Your breath is slow, your mind is still, and sleep is beginning to wrap around you like a gentle cloak. We will meet again soon. Let your dreams drift softly. Now God, imagine for a moment that you are standing outside that cold chamber. The night air brushes against your face, soft and distant. Behind the velvet curtains, the king continues to whisper in a language no one understands. His lips form shapes that seem older than Latin, older than Hebrew, perhaps older than any written script. The alchemists from Florence, dressed in dark robes, hold their bottles carefully, afraid of spilling even a drop of the shimmering liquid they've brought. The mixture of snake venom and dissolved gold is not just medicine, it's a secret, a ritual. One of the alchemists quietly turns to the others and says something strange, that this rotting disease is not an illness, but a doorway, a passage between the physical world and something else. The royal physicians dismiss the idea, calling it nonsense. They focus on the body, on the king's skin, which still softens like wax near a flame. But deep down, even they feel something is wrong in a way that cannot be explained by science. The queen sends messages to Rome, asking the pope for spiritual advice. Some say she even writes to a group of monks in the mountains of Spain, known for dealing with dark miracles. But no reply comes. The days pass, and the king's body becomes more fragile. His eyes remain bright, aware, and fully conscious. His voice, though, becomes softer like silk brushing across stone. He asks for music to be played in the room, not because he wants to be entertained, but because silence has become too heavy. The musicians come, trembling, their hands shaking as they pluck the strings of ancient instruments. The sound is thin and cold, like winter air. One of the doctors, an older man named Pierre de la Vigne, keeps a secret journal. In it, he writes that he saw something impossible. While changing the king's bandages, he noticed a pattern on the thigh. Royal skin, lines and curves forming symbols beneath the sores, like writing. The pattern was not made by hand. It was as if the rod itself was writing on the flesh, creating a script. The doctor copies the symbols onto parchment, afraid to show anyone. He plans to send it to the scholars at the Sorbonne, but fear stops him. What if the letters are a message not meant for human eyes? Meanwhile, outside the palace, the rumors grow louder. The people of France began calling their king L'Aro Porcent, the rotting king. Some say he is turning into a relic while still breathing, like a living corpse meant to be worshipped or feared. The priests debate whether to perform the last rites, but how can they do that when the heart still beats? Every night, the candles are lit again. The chamber is cleaned, the windows opened briefly to let out the smell, though it always returns. It clings to the walls, to the bedsheets, to the hands of the servants. The smell of a man alive, yet already part of the grave. Then something stranger happens. One night, during the coldest hours before dawn, the king asks for a mirror. They hesitate, but he insists. When they bring the polished glass, he stares. At himself, his lips do not move, but his reflection does. The image in the mirror smiles softly, even though his real mouth is still. One of the attendants drops the mirror in terror, but the king orders another brought immediately. Again, he looks. Again, the reflection smiles on its own, as if the king's soul is beginning to split from his body, like mist separating from the sea. The alchemists whisper to each other. One of them believes the process cannot be stopped because it is not an illness, it is a transformation. He speaks of an old legend from Persia, of a man who became so heavy with power that his body could no longer hold it, and so his flesh melted away, leaving only the spirit behind. But the other alchemists disagree. They believe this is an experiment gone wrong. Some think the royal cooks may have poisoned the king accidentally with mercury. Others believe the exotic treatments the king used, rare balms from India, strange oils from Venice, have mixed inside his body in ways nature did not intend. But there's a problem. Other kings used the same treatments and survived. This rot, this decay while alive, is rare, almost unique. Then comes the secret no one outside the palace ever hears. The alchemists decide to try one more ritual. They call it the Chrysopian reversal. In theory, it is a process to turn the human body into something like gold, not literally, but spiritually. A body free from death. They believe the king's current state is a halfway point, a dangerous in-between, and if they do not finish the process, he will remain like this forever alive, rotting, trapped between worlds. The ingredients for the reversal are rare, molten, gold cooled into powder, a single feather from a black swan, the venom of a serpent harvested at midnight, and water from a spring that no longer exists on maps. They begin the ritual. In silence, with only the sound of the king's breath growing slower, they prepare the mixture. They place it in a shallow bowl, heated gently over a flame that never flickers. As the mixture glows, the room seems to tilt. The walls feel closer. The candles grow longer, their flames stretching as if time is bending. And then the king speaks again, this time in perfect Greek, a language he never studied. He says a phrase that the alchemists recognize from an ancient manuscript, something from the time of Pythagoras. Matter is a veil. When the veil burns, we see the other side. The alchemists are terrified. How does he know this? But they do not stop. They apply the mixture to his skin, every inch of it. For hours they work, their hands trembling. And slowly, very slowly, the smell changes. The rot does not go away, but it shifts less like death, more like something transformed. His skin becomes thin, like parchment, but the sores stop growing. His heart still beats. His eyes still move, and the alchemists believe they have succeeded. But the question remains, what have they created? In the next part, You will hear the secret the king whispered just before dawn, a sentence that would vanish from history books, but survive in hidden journals kept by those who witnessed this event. For now, close your eyes again. Imagine you are in that quiet palace hallway, hearing nothing but the soft rustle of candle flames. Your breath is calm. The night wraps around you like a soft cloak. We will return to this strange story soon. Let your mind drift gently toward sleep. The night deepened over the palace, and the alchemists, exhausted but alert, sat in silence around the king's bed. Their robes were stained with the golden mixture, their hands cold from the hours spent. In ritual, the king lay motionless except for his eyes, which stayed open, shimmering faintly in the candlelight. Outside the chamber, the bells of a distant monastery rang softly, marking the passage of time in a world that no longer felt real. The smell of decay still hovered in the room, but it was different. Now, not quite the scent of death, but not life either. Something between. As the first gray line of dawn appeared beyond the window shutters, the king whispered something. His voice was thin, like paper tearing. One of the alchemists leaned closer, barely breathing, to catch the words. The king said, "The body is only the first palace. The second is waiting." No one knew what he meant. The phrase made no sense. Yet the alchemists recorded it carefully, writing it down in ink mixed with ash, because they believed this moment would never come again. For the next 3 days, the king remained in this strange state. His body did not heal, but it also did not worsen. His skin remained like thin parchment, his veins visible beneath, like blue threads on old paper. His lips no longer spoke, but his eyes followed every movement in the room. When his physicians tested his pulse, they found it steady too steady, like a clock, mechanical and cold. The queen stayed away, sending only letters through her attendants. She refused to look at her husband's face, afraid of what she might see. Outside the palace, the people of France whispered more rumors. Some said the king had died and been replaced by a ghost. Others believed he was being kept alive by magic for political reasons to avoid chaos in the kingdom. But the truth was stranger than any rumor. In the deepest hours of the third night, one of the alchemists named Lorenzo confessed something to his colleagues. He had read a text, long hidden, from the library of Alexandria's lost scrolls, a fragment copied by hand before the Great Fire destroyed the originals. In it, there was mention of a process called transvitum putrefactio, the transition of life through decay. According to this text, there were certain states of the human body where death did not occur naturally, but became optional. If the body entered a specific chemical condition, rotting, but not dying, it might allow the spirit to cross into another layer of existence while still connected to the flesh. Lorenzo believed that their mixture, the venom and gold combination, had accidentally triggered this ancient process. The other alchemists argued, saying that it was impossible. But Lorenzo pointed to the king's steady heartbeat, his still eyes, and the strange sentence he had whispered. The body is only the first palace. They began to wonder, had the king crossed into something? Was he seeing another world through eyes that no longer belonged only to this one? Meanwhile, the doctors continued their work. They tried more traditional treatments, ointments of honey and myrrh, prayers whispered over his body, burning herbs to cleanse the air. But nothing changed. The king remained suspended, neither living nor dying. His skin, when touched, was cold and soft like wax, but his breath continued, shallow and regular. In the quiet hours before dawn, one of the servants noticed something strange. The king's shadow on the wall did not match his body's position. When he lay still, the shadow moved slightly, as if swaying in a wind no one could feel. The servant said nothing, fearing punishment, but every night he saw the same thing, the shadow bending, shifting, sometimes whispering in a voice too soft to understand. Then came the message from Florence. A letter, sealed in black wax, arrived for the alchemists. It contained instructions from a secret society, the Order of the Golden Veil, that had learned of the king's condition. The letter warned them not to stop the process. If they tried to reverse it now, they risked trapping the king's consciousness between layers of reality forever. Instead, they should guide him further, help him complete the transition. But how? The letter gave no recipe, no clear instructions, only a symbol, a golden circle with a crack down the middle. The alchemists debated what to do. Some wanted to burn the letter, pretend they had never seen it. Others believed they must follow its advice. In the end, they chose silence. They told the court physicians nothing. They told the queen nothing. But at night, they whispered in the corners of the palace, speaking of ancient rites long forgotten. They began to study the king's eyes. Even though his lips no longer moved, his gaze shifted to certain symbols that they placed in front of him. When they held up a simple drawing of a house, he did not react. But when they showed him the symbol from the letter, the cracked golden circle, his pupils widened and his breath changed rhythm. This happened again and again. The alchemists realized that the king was communicating, not through words, but through attention. His consciousness, though trapped in a body that no longer functioned like a normal human frame, was aware, awake, and perhaps learning something none of them could imagine. In the following nights, the alchemists performed quiet experiments. They placed small golden coins near his skin and found that the metal would tarnish within minutes, as if exposed to acid. But the king's skin remained the same, unchanged, fragile, and yet untouched by further decay. It was as if his body had entered a new kind of chemistry, one unknown to science. One of the alchemists wondered aloud, had they created the first true homunculus, a human vessel that contained both life and death, neither fully here nor fully gone? In the deepest part of the night, when even the candles burned low and the corridors of the palace grew cold, the king's eyes glowed faintly in the dark. His breath slowed to a rhythm that no one could match, a rhythm that did not belong to the human world anymore. And then, just before the fourth dawn, he whispered again, this time louder. The words were clear, though no one recognized the language. The sound itself seemed to make the air shiver. The alchemists wrote down the syllables carefully, each letter drawn with trembling hands. But when they tried to translate the message, they discovered something even more unsettling. The sequence of sounds, when spoken aloud, caused strange reactions. One man's candle went out by itself. Another's cup of water became warm. They realized the words were not just language, they were a kind of key, a sonic pattern that could change the state of matter. What had the king become? In the next part, you'll hear the discovery that the alchemists made after analyzing the king's blood, a discovery so strange that it would be hidden for centuries, buried in secret vaults beneath European monasteries. For now, close your eyes. Imagine you are back in that quiet room, the curtains drawn, the candles low, the world soft around you. The past is not just a memory, it is alive, breathing quietly in the spaces between your thoughts. Let yourself drift gently toward sleep. We will return to this mystery soon. Rest well. The hours after the king's whispered words were the quietest the palace had ever known. No one spoke above a murmur. The servants moved like shadows, careful not to disturb the strange calm that had settled over the royal chamber. Outside, the sky remained dark, as if dawn itself was hesitating. Inside, the king's breath came in steady, shallow waves, each one like a distant tide. His eyes, half-lidded but aware, watched everything, the candle flames, the alchemists. Pacing softly at the edges of the room, the gold flecks in the bowls beside his bed. There was a new problem now. The alchemists had collected samples of the king's blood during the previous rituals. Normally, royal blood was never studied so closely. In the medieval world, blood was sacred, symbolic, tied to God and kingship. But this was no ordinary time. They placed the samples under primitive lenses, using the glasswork learned from Arab scholars, carefully focusing the little light available. What they saw made no sense. The king's blood was changing. Instead of the usual deep red, it had developed a faint shimmer, like gold dust mixed into ink. The particles floated, moving not randomly, but in tiny spirals, as if following patterns too small for the eye to fully catch. Lorenzo, the alchemist who had first spoken of the transvatum putrefactio, was the first to notice it. He dipped a needle into the sample and placed a single drop onto a thin piece of polished silver. As the blood touched the silver, it formed, a symbol not by human hand, but by itself. A perfect spiral, turning clockwise, glowing faintly before fading. The alchemists gasped, but silently. They dared not alert the physicians or the court. This was no longer a medical issue. It was something else entirely. Lorenzo recorded his observation in a private journal. He wrote that the blood was behaving, as if it contained intention, not merely life, but awareness. The question no one dared to ask was, whose awareness? Was this still the king's blood? Or had something else entered his body during the process? Something old, something foreign. To human existence? They debated the origins of the phenomenon. One alchemist suggested it was the snake venom they had used in the mixture, perhaps interacting with the gold, creating strange chemical reactions. Another whispered about ancient texts that spoke of aurum vivum, living gold, a legendary substance believed to have consciousness of its own. In those texts, gold was not just a metal, but a kind of spirit trapped in matter, and if released properly, it could think, respond, even reshape reality. Could the alchemists have accidentally awakened this hidden property? Or had the king himself become part of it? Days passed, but the king did not die. His body remained unchanged. The soft, parchment-like skin held steady. The wounds did not heal, but they also did not grow. His eyes still moved, slow and steady, following the light and shadows of the room. The doctors, desperate to explain the situation to the court, called it miraculous stasis. They told the queen that the king was resting, in a state of holy sleep, but in secret they feared something darker. Meanwhile, the alchemists performed more tests. They placed small animals, mice, birds near the king's bed to observe how they reacted to his presence. Each time, the animals grew still, silent, their eyes wide as if seeing something invisible. One bird died without injury, its heart stopping in perfect health. Another mouse began to shed its fur in strange spirals, matching the patterns in the king's blood. The alchemists recorded every detail, writing in tiny letters by candlelight, their ink running thin from so much use. Then came the discovery. That changed everything. One of the alchemists noticed that the king's breath, though soft, was leaving traces in the air. They held a piece of polished obsidian near his mouth during sleep. On the stone, a faint pattern appeared, like frost on glass, but arranged in deliberate lines, ancient symbols, older than any written language they knew. Lorenzo cross-referenced the patterns with manuscripts stored in the forbidden sections of Florentine libraries. There, he found partial matches, not in any medical book, but in alchemical scrolls said to date back to pre-Egyptian times. The patterns were not just decorations. They were instructions, not for healing, but for transformation. The scrolls spoke of a process called mortalis lux, the mortal light, a state where the boundary between life and death becomes transparent, and the body serves as a lens for something beyond human senses. Lorenzo read the words again and again, his hands shaking. Could the king be in this state? Had the ritual intended to stop the rot actually moved the king into a phase where his body was no longer fully human? They tested his blood once more. This time, they used a drop of it to touch ancient metals: bronze, iron, lead. Each metal responded differently. Bronze turned brittle. Iron grew warmer to the touch, as if remembering fire. Lead became lighter, almost as if shedding its weight. The alchemists were terrified. What kind of blood could change the nature of metal? They whispered about the philosopher's stone, long considered a myth. But perhaps it was never a stone at all. Perhaps it was a condition, a state of being hidden within the transformation of the human form. Could the king be becoming this? The question was too large to answer. The alchemists sealed their journals, hiding them in lead boxes beneath the palace floors. No one outside their circle was told. Not the doctors, not the queen, not the court, but the king knew. His eyes followed their every move. His lips did not speak, but his gaze spoke volumes. In the dark hours, when the candles burned low, the alchemists sometimes felt as though the king's thoughts were not only his own, as if something else, something larger, was looking through his eyes. That night, the lead alchemist dreamed of the king standing at the edge of a great black sea, his flesh made of gold and paper, his eyes as deep as wells. In the dream, the king whispered again, "The second palace is ready." The alchemists awoke in terror, their clothes damp with sweat, their hearts racing. Was the dream shared? All of them had seen the same vision. When they compared notes at dawn, they realized they had each dreamed of the same image, the same words, at the same hour. This was no ordinary sickness, no ordinary man. The process was continuing, whether they wished it or not. And what happened next was even more unsettling. In part 5, you'll discover what the king's breath did to the walls of his chamber, and why, centuries later, restorers would uncover something behind those walls that history tried to erase. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are back in that cold, silent room, the candles flickering low, the air heavy but calm. Let your mind drift. The past is alive, but you are safe here, wrapped in quiet. We will return to the story soon. Rest well. The palace walls had always been silent observers, holding within them centuries of whispered confessions, royal schemes, and the quiet footsteps of servants moving in the dark. But after the king's transformation began, something strange happened to those walls, something that no one in the court understood, not then, and perhaps not even now. It started with a simple observation. The royal physicians noticed that the tapestries near the king's bed began to fade in unusual patterns. The reds dimmed first, then the gold threads lost their shine, but not evenly. Instead, the fading formed shapes, spirals, circles, lines that echoed the same strange symbols found in the king's breath and blood. One of the servants tried to scrub the marks away, thinking it was mold from the damp autumn air, but the patterns reappeared by morning, softer, but still there. The alchemists noticed, but said nothing aloud. They believed the walls were beginning to respond to the king's condition, as if the space around him were no longer inert stone, but something alive, shifting quietly under human senses. The king, in his soft, shallow breath, continued to whisper in unknown tongues at night. His words left condensation on the cold air, and sometimes that mist, when caught in moonlight, revealed symbols. It wasn't language exactly, not letters, but something older, something that felt like meaning itself, stripped of grammar, stripped of human rules. The alchemists started to document these marks. They pressed thin sheets of lead against the cold stone walls at night, hoping to capture the faint imprints. To their astonishment, the lead recorded soft indentations where the air had touched. It, like invisible writing, slowly carving itself into matter. The lead sheets were rolled up, and hidden beneath floorboards. But not all of them stayed hidden. Centuries later, in the late 19th century, restorers working in the Château de Plessis-les-Tours would find several of these rolls tucked deep in the walls, confused by the strange symbols and the delicate spiral grooves pressed into the soft metal. Those restorers did not know what they had found. Most of the rolls were lost or melted down for scrap during the wars of the 20th century. But a few survived, locked in private collections. Some modern cryptographers who studied them in secret believed the patterns were not just decoration. They resembled mathematical sequences related to quantum harmonics, patterns of vibration that would not be discovered by science until centuries after the king's time. But in 1494, none of this was known. The alchemists only knew that the world inside the king's chamber was changing. The tapestries faded further, leaving ghost-like shapes in the fabric. The stone walls developed hairline cracks, but not from weight or time. The cracks followed specific, deliberate lines, as if someone had carved into the stone from within. When the alchemists traced the patterns, they realized they matched diagrams from alchemical manuscripts describing the structure of prima materia, the first material, the building block of all existence. Could it be that the king's condition was somehow altering not just his body, but the space around him? The question terrified them. They tried to measure the change. They brought compasses, rulers, and weights. They discovered that distances within the room subtly shifted during the night. The same wall, measured at dusk, would be longer or shorter by morning, by just millimeters, but enough to notice. The floors seemed to slope in ways that defied architecture. A marble column near the window appeared to twist slightly, not visibly, but in the way it reflected candlelight. The alchemists recorded everything. They began to fear they were no longer in the same physical world as the rest of the palace. The king's chamber had become something else, a pocket of reality folding in on itself. One night, during a heavy rainstorm, Lorenzo, the lead alchemist, performed a test. He placed a bowl of still water on the floor beside the king's bed. For hours, the water did not move, untouched by the wind or footsteps. But just before dawn, ripples appeared. Not from any breeze, but from the air itself, as if the space had begun to breathe in time with the king. The ripples formed tiny spirals, the same pattern that had appeared in his blood and on the walls. Lorenzo tried to touch the water, but the moment his finger broke the surface, he felt a shock, not pain, but a sudden awareness, as if he had briefly touched something vast and ancient. He withdrew his hand, his heart pounding. The king, still silent, still half-rotting, still alive, opened his eyes wider for just a moment. His gaze met Lorenzo's, and the alchemist felt an overwhelming thought enter his mind, not in words, but in pure knowing. Do not interfere. The message was clear. Whatever was happening, it was not to be stopped. The king was in the middle of a process that no human had ever witnessed, and it was continuing with or without their consent. The walls of the chamber, responding to the fonding, to the va. King's breath began to hum at night, a vibration so soft that only those closest to the bed could feel it. The sound was not musical, nor was it noise. It was somewhere between the two, like a deep chord played in silence, sensed in the bones, rather than heard in the ears. The alchemists took turns sleeping, always keeping one person awake to observe. But even in sleep, they shared the same dreams. Visions of spirals in gold, of cities made of transparent stone, of a second palace existing beneath this one, invisible but real. They dreamed of a great wheel turning in the sky, and of the king's body becoming a doorway, not through death, but through decay. The process was not ending. It was deepening. The alchemists began to worry that the walls of the palace might eventually break, not from collapse, but from transformation. sliding into some other geometry. The stones themselves might melt into new forms. The air might thicken. Reality might shift in ways no human could reverse. But they said nothing. To speak openly of such things was dangerous, both politically and spiritually. The queen remained unaware of the details. She stayed in her private chambers, praying, asking God for a miracle. But the miracle was already happening, just not the kind anyone expected. In the final hours before dawn on the seventh day, the king whispered again. This time, the words were in no known language, but the alchemists understood their meaning directly, without translation. The second palace is not built with stone. It is woven from time. His eyes closed briefly, but his breath continued, steady and calm. Outside the chamber, the rain stopped. The first bird of morning sang in the distance, unaware of the transformation unfolding in the royal bed. In part 6, you'll hear how the alchemists tried to record the king's final instructions, and why those notes would disappear from history, hidden by secret societies for centuries to come. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are standing just beyond the curtain, listening to the soft rhythm of the king's breath, feeling the gentle hum of the walls around you. The night is calm, the story waits, and sleep is near. Rest well. The rain had stopped, but the palace walls still held the memory of its stone cold to the touch, wet in the seams, as if the water had not drained away, but simply dissolved into the air. Inside the king's chamber, the candles burned. Low, their wax puddled in soft circles on the silver trays below. The alchemists did not sleep that night. They sat silently around the king's bed, eyes heavy, but minds alert, waiting for the next sign. They had become used to the strange rhythms of this new reality, the shifting of walls, the soft hum in the floor, the way their dreams no longer felt separate from waking life. The king's breath had stabilized into something mechanical, like a clock hidden in the folds of his body. His skin remained thin, papery, almost transparent in places, but the rot no longer spread. It hovered at the edges of his flesh, a boundary that neither advanced nor retreated. His eyes stayed half open, reflecting not just the candlelight, but something deeper ashine, like distant stars under still water. It was in these early hours, just before the birds began their morning calls, that the king spoke again. This time, the words were clearer, though still in a language unknown to the alchemists. Yet they understood him, not with their ears, but directly, as if the meaning had bypassed language itself and entered straight into their minds. He told them to write, but not with ink, not on paper. The king instructed them to prepare a mixture, solution of gold dust, lead filings, and the oil of crushed saffron, to create a liquid that would record not just letters, but intention. The alchemists obeyed, working in silence. They heated the mixture carefully, adding thin shavings of opal stone ground into powder. When the liquid reached the right consistency, they dipped their quills, not into ink, but into this glowing golden oil. They began to write, each symbol guided by the king's gaze. The parchment they used was not ordinary. It was vellum made from the skin of unborn calves, polished smooth to hold the smallest details. The symbols flowed onto the page, curved lines and soft spirals, marks that seemed to shift under the eye if stared at too long. When they finished the first page, the alchemists realized something unnerving. The writing was not static. The symbols shimmered faintly, moving just beneath the surface of the vellum, as if alive. The alchemists debated whether to continue, but the king's eyes remained fixed on them, calm and silent, commanding them to proceed. They filled 7 pages that night. Each page held not words, but patterns, lines, circles, forms that felt more like instructions for reality itself, rather than messages for the human mind. The alchemists did not understand the full meaning, but they sensed the weight of what they were recording. This was not medicine. It was not alchemy in the old sense. It was something new. A blueprint for crossing between layers of existence. A map of the second palace the king had mentioned. When the writing was complete, the king's breath slowed further, but did not stop. He whispered again, telling them to hide the pages, not in the palace library, not in the royal vaults, but somewhere where no one would find them for centuries. He spoke of a location beneath the earth, where the roots of trees touched stone, a place beneath a monastery that had not yet been built. The alchemists obeyed. They sealed the pages in lead tubes, wrapped them in waxed cloth, and prepared them for a journey that would take them beyond the kingdom's borders. According to later rumors, 2 of the alchemists left the palace that very night, under cover of darkness, carrying the scrolls with them. They traveled south, beyond the Alps, into territories not yet charted on royal maps. One of them, Lorenzo, would disappear from history entirely. The other, a man named Giacomo, would later join a secret order that eventually became part of the Rosicrucian movement, though that too would become lost in layers of myth and legend. Back in the palace, the king remained in his bed, his body frozen in its strange balance between life and decay. The walls of his chamber continued to hum softly at night. The air within the room no longer felt like ordinary air. It was denser, heavier, filled with a kind of quiet pressure that made breathing feel like an act of reverence. The remaining alchemists stayed close to the king, recording every detail, but their writings from this point forward were encoded, locked in ciphers no one could read without the key. Historians centuries later would find fragments of these notes in private collections, but the meanings remained hidden. What became clear, though, was that the alchemists believed the king had passed into a state beyond normal human experience. He was not alive in the traditional sense, nor was he dead. He had become a vessel for something else, a process unfolding through him, not because of him. Some believed he had become the philosopher's stone itself, not as an object, but as a human transformation, the ultimate goal of alchemy achieved not in gold, but in the structure of consciousness. Others believed the king had contacted something ancient, something from before human history, and that the symbols written that night were part of an ongoing communication with that other realm. Years would pass. The king's death would eventually be announced to the public, though no body was shown. Official records claimed he had died of a sudden accident, a blow to the head while walking through a narrow door. But those who had been present in the chamber knew the truth was different. The king had not died in any ordinary way. His body was removed secretly, and his chamber was sealed for decades. When it was finally reopened during renovations a century later, workers found that the walls bore no signs of age, no cracks, number, dust. The space was as fresh as the day it had been closed, as if time itself had skipped over it. Some of the alchemical symbols remained faintly visible in the stone, but most had faded, or perhaps gone somewhere else. The king's bed was gone. His personal belongings had disappeared. Only the echoes of soft breathing, recorded in the stone, seemed to linger like the faintest memory of a sound long past. In the next part, you'll hear about what happened to the sealed scrolls, the ones written in gold oil, and why certain secret societies in Europe still search for them today, believing they hold the key to crossing between worlds. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are sitting quietly in the corner of that silent chamber, the walls soft with patterns you cannot understand, the candles flickering low, your breath slowing with the rhythm of the night. Sleep is near. We will return to the story soon. Rest well. The alchemists who carried the golden scrolls disappeared into history like footprints in wet sand there for a moment, then gone, washed away by time. Yet the scrolls themselves, written in shimmering liquid that moved beneath the vellum, did not vanish entirely. Whispers of their existence survived in the secret corridors of European occult societies for centuries after the king's death had been officially declared. The scrolls were said to contain more than symbols. They were believed to hold living information, a type of knowledge that did not merely sit on a page, but unfolded like a plant once the right conditions were met. According to the fragments that survived, the alchemists took the scrolls south, beyond the Alps, crossing into regions that, at the time, were untouched by royal politics. One of them, Lorenzo, traveled toward the remote monasteries of Montserrat, where strange lights had been seen in the mountains long before Christianity arrived. The other, Giacomo, headed east toward the Carpathian ranges, carrying copies of the symbols etched onto thin plates of lead. Their reasons for separating were not written down, but some believe it was intentional to scatter the knowledge, to prevent any one person or nation from holding the entire map to the transformation. Over the centuries, pieces of the scrolls were said to surface in the possession of secret groups, the Rosicrucians, the Hermetic orders, the invisible colleges of pre-Enlightenment Europe. None of these societies could fully unlock the meaning of the writings. The problem was not translation. The symbols did not correspond to any known language. They were not hieroglyphs, not runes, not letters at all. Instead, they appeared to be shapes designed to interact with the mind at a level deeper than thought, a kind of pattern recognition that operated beneath language itself. Some who stared at the scrolls for too long reported strange sensations, a feeling of falling upward, a sense of hearing sounds in silence, soft spirals in the vision, even when the eyes were closed. It was as if the symbols, when observed, began to rewrite perception, gently pulling the mind toward a different kind of awareness. In the 17th century, a mathematician named Athanasius Kircher, known for his obsession with mysterious languages, claimed to have seen one of these scrolls. He described it not as a text, but as a living arrangement of gold on skin, a document that shifted when you breathed near it. Kircher tried to copy the symbols into his journals, but when modern scholars examined those copies centuries later, they found the drawings incomplete, like musical notes written without rhythm, missing the silent structure beneath the sound. The original scrolls remained hidden. There are stories of attempts to recover them. In the 18th century, during the rise of European Freemasonry, certain lodges sent expeditions to old monasteries, searching for clues to what they called the second architecture, a rumored structure of reality hidden beneath the surface of ordinary life. They believed the scrolls held part of that map. Some of these expeditions vanished. Others returned empty-handed, but with participants who refused to speak of what they had seen. In one recorded case, a man named Claude de Beaumont returned. From such a search, his hair turned white in a single season, his journals burned by his hand before he died silently in a Parisian convent. The scrolls became legend, but the echoes of their patterns did not disappear. Certain designs from the scrolls began to appear in unexpected places, in the borders of medieval grimoires, in the weavings of Eastern carpets, in the architecture of hidden chambers beneath European cathedrals. Some believed the alchemists had scattered fragments of the knowledge, embedding the symbols into culture so that over time, pieces of the pattern would survive, even if the scrolls themselves were lost. And yet, some whispered that the scrolls were not lost at all, that they had been deliberately hidden in places where no empire, no church, no kingdom would find them. One rumor placed them beneath the foundations of a small chapel in Spain, built atop a pagan site of worship, where the stones were said to hum softly at night. Another rumor placed them in a lead-lined coffin buried beneath the Carpathian Mountains, guarded by generations of silent monks who spoke no words from birth to death. But perhaps the strangest version of the story was the one told in hushed tones among certain circles of European mystics, that the scrolls were not objects anymore, that they had dissolved into the minds of the alchemists who had written them, passing from one consciousness to another like a virus of awareness, spreading quietly through lineage, through blood, through dreams. In this version of the story, the second palace, the mysterious structure the king had spoken of, was not a place at all, but a process. A change in perception, unfolding generation by generation, hidden in plain sight. If that were true, then perhaps the scrolls were never meant to be read ordinarily. They were meant to be lived. The alchemists who stayed behind in the palace continued to guard the king's chamber for years after his official death. They did not allow the room to be cleaned or repainted. The walls remained as they were, soft with strange spirals, humming faintly in the dark. Over time, the symbols faded from view, but not from effect. People who entered the room reported strange dreams, afterward visions of transparent palaces, of time folding into itself, of doors opening where there were no walls. In the centuries that followed, kings and queens of France avoided that part of the chateau. Architects redesigned the palace layout to steer visitors away from the sealed chamber. The records of the king's final days were edited, rewritten, and locked away in royal archives where no scholar could find them. And yet the echoes persisted. Some believed that the transformation that began with the king did not end with his body. It continued through history, quietly altering the minds of those who came close to the mystery, shaping art, philosophy, and even science in subtle ways. A spiral in a painting, a circle within a circle in a cathedral window, a pattern of notes in a piece of music that feels like a memory you can't place. All fragments of the second palace, scattered like seeds across time. In the next part, you'll hear what was found during a secret excavation beneath the old monastery centuries later, an artifact so unusual that it was locked away in the Vatican's forbidden archives, never shown to the public. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are sitting at the edge of this story, breathing quietly, listening to the soft hum of forgotten knowledge moving just beneath the surface of sleep. Rest now. We will return to this mystery soon. Very soon. Centuries passed, but the king's story never truly faded. It drifted through European history like a soft current beneath still waters, barely noticed, almost forgotten, yet always there, just beneath the surface of official records. The scrolls, the alchemists, the sealed room, all became rumors wrapped in other rumors, half-whispers exchanged between secret orders, hidden societies, and midnight scholars who collected forbidden knowledge. But in 1891, something happened that brought the mystery back into sharp focus. A secret excavation was ordered beneath an ancient monastery in Montserrat, Spain, a place long associated with strange phenomena. The monastery sat high in the mountains, its jagged rocks and misty cliffs giving it an air of otherworldliness. Officially, the excavation was for structural reinforcement. But the truth was different. The Vatican had received reports from a monk who claimed to have seen light beneath the monastery, floor-soft golden spirals moving through the cracks in the stone, as if the earth itself were breathing symbols. The Vatican, protective of such matters, sent a small team of specialists. Among them was a Jesuit scholar named Father Emilio Caravelli, known for his work in deciphering obscure texts. He was also rumored to have access to the Vatican's forbidden archives, a place where the Church kept records too strange or dangerous for public eyes. Under the cover of darkness, Father Caravelli and his team began to dig beneath the monastery, removing stone slabs that had not been touched for hundreds of years. The work was careful, quiet. No one outside the inner circle knew the details, not even the other monks. After 2 nights of digging, they reached a hidden chamber, a small underground space, no larger than a single room. The walls were covered in soft dust, but beneath the surface, faint spirals were visible, carved into the stone. At the center of the chamber was a lead-lined box. It had no hinges, no lock, just a perfect seam around its edge, as if it had been cast whole and then sliced open with impossible precision. The box was cold to the touch, colder than the surrounding air. When they lifted it, they found it unusually light, as if the contents inside were somehow weightless. Father Caravelli ordered the box sealed and transported directly to Rome, bypassing all official channels. The artifact never appeared in any public records. It went straight into the Vatican's secret collection known, among insiders, as this Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, or simply the Black Room. But rumors leaked from within. According to documents smuggled out decades later by a defrocked priest, the box was eventually opened in a secure underground chamber beneath St. Peter's Basilica. What they found inside was not gold, nor relics, nor human remains. It was something else entirely. A scroll, yes, but not like any scroll they had seen. The material was soft, flexible, and warm to the touch, like skin, but not skin. The surface shimmered, not with paint or ink, but with shifting patterns of light, as if tiny rivers of gold moved just beneath the surface. The symbols on the scroll were familiar to Father Caravelli. He recognized them from ancient alchemical texts, specifically from diagrams said to have come from the lost writings of the king who had rotted alive. The patterns matched the descriptions whispered through centuries of secret societies, spirals that did not merely represent cycles, but generated cycles, circles that did not symbolize eternity, but actively shaped perception of time when observed. The scroll was alive, in some way no one could explain. When placed in darkness, it continued to glow faintly, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Some in the Vatican believed it was a form of divine relic, proof of contact with something beyond human comprehension. Others feared it was dangerous, a forbidden technology from a past better left buried. Tests were performed. The scroll's material resisted all forms of analysis. Microscopes revealed no fibers, no cells, no physical structure that matched anything on Earth. When touched with gloved hands, the symbols responded, not changing shape exactly, but adjusting slightly, as if adapting to the consciousness of the observer. The most troubling discovery came when they tried to photograph the scroll. The images, developed as blank sheets of film, but with one anomaly: the negatives contained soft echoes of spirals, not present in the original photograph. Some described these as interference patterns, but others believed they were visualizations of information the scroll was projecting beyond normal sight. Father Caravelli kept detailed notes, though these too would disappear from official archives within years. According to second-hand reports, he became obsessed with the idea that the scroll was not a message, but a mechanism and engine designed to transform reality in small, almost imperceptible ways. He speculated that if enough people looked at the symbols for long enough, their minds would begin to shift toward a different mode of perception. The world itself might start to unravel its familiar structure, revealing the second palace, the one the king had whispered about so long ago. Caravelli wrote in his journal that the scroll was not meant to be read alone. It was part of a system. Other scrolls likely existed, scattered across Europe, perhaps hidden beneath other monasteries, buried in catacombs, or encoded into architecture. He feared that if someone were to gather all of them together, the world might change in ways that could not be reversed. Shortly after these notes, Father Caravelli disappeared. Some say he went into voluntary exile. Others claim the church removed him for his dangerous ideas. His journals were sealed in the Vatican archives, labeled as apocryphal and unsuitable for public release. But fragments of his writings survived, copied in secret by assistants who had read just enough to become frightened. These copies describe one final experiment, an attempt to interact directly with the scroll's symbols through meditation and silence. Caravelli wrote that during this experiment, he experienced time folding in on itself. He saw moments from history as spirals, not lines, and heard voices from both the past and future speaking in harmony. His last note, written in small, careful Latin script, simply said, "The second palace is not coming. It is already here." The scroll remains locked away, never shown to the public. But every few years, a scholar disappears while researching certain patterns in ancient manuscripts. Architectural designs in remote European chapels sometimes reveal motifs that match the forbidden symbols. A piece of music from the 1600s surfaces with notations that resemble the spiral code. Some believe these are coincidences. Others think the scroll is still working quietly, shaping reality from its hiding place, continuing the process that began with the king who rotted alive. In the next part, you'll hear about a forgotten ritual that connects the scrolls to a hidden map buried beneath the streets of Paris, and why certain parts of the city hum at night in ways most people cannot hear. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a silent archive, holding a scroll that shimmers softly in the dark, its patterns moving like slow breath. The night is still, your mind is calm, and sleep is near. We will return to this story soon. Rest well. Long after the scroll was locked away in the Vatican's secret vaults, other traces of the king's transformation began to surface in places no one expected. Paris, the city of lights, the city of cathedrals and revolutions, held one of the quietest secrets of all a forgotten ritual, linked to the same symbols that shimmered beneath the king's rotting skin centuries earlier. This part of the story does not appear in ordinary history books. It lives in whispered conversations among archivists, in footnotes buried so deep they might as well be in another dimension. It begins beneath the streets of Paris, in the labyrinth of tunnels and catacombs that stretch like veins under the city's surface. These passages, dug centuries ago to extract limestone for building churches and palaces, became an underground map, a shadow version of the city above. Most people know the catacombs as a place of bones, where walls are stacked with skulls and femurs, arranged neatly in silent tribute to the dead. But what fewer people realize is that beneath the catacombs, even deeper, there exists another. Layer a network of chambers that do not appear on any modern map. These chambers were sealed long before the French Revolution, long before the city's modern foundations were laid. According to hidden documents stored in private Parisian collections, some of these chambers contain carvings that match the symbols found on the king's scrolls. In the late 1700s, a secret group of scholars, known as the Écauders du Souterrain, the listeners of the underground, began to explore these forbidden spaces. They were not mere adventurers. Many were mathematicians, architects, and philosophers, drawn together by a shared obsession with the patterns hidden in both nature and human design. They believed that the city of Paris itself had been quietly constructed over centuries to mirror certain alchemical principles, a grand design that could only be seen when viewed from below. At the heart of this belief was the idea of the second palace, the same term the king had whispered while lying, half-rotted but fully conscious. The listeners of the underground thought that the second palace was not just a metaphor. It was an actual pattern hidden beneath the first city, woven into the geometry of tunnels, stones, and silence. Their rituals involved moving through the catacombs in precise spirals, following maps not made of streets but of resonance points, places where sound behaved strangely, where whispers carried farther than they should, where footsteps echoed twice instead of once. They believed these were locations where the boundary between ordinary reality and the second palace thinned. One of the most curious parts of their practice was a nightly ritual called Le Cercle de l'Oubli, the Circle of Forgetting. Participants would gather in a small circular chamber beneath what is now Place des Vosges. There, they would sit in silence, eyes closed, listening for the hum. Modern science might call it infrasonic vibration, but the listeners called it the breath beneath, a soft tone that seemed to rise from the earth itself. They believed that by aligning their minds with this hum, they could shift perception just slightly, enough to glimpse the pattern's underlying ordinary existence. Documents from their meetings describe sensations similar to those experienced by the alchemists in the king's chamber centuries earlier: the feeling of time folding, of walls breathing, of space gently tilting, as if reality were a cloth being rearranged. The listeners left carvings on the walls of these hidden chamber spirals, circles, soft arcs that matched the golden symbols found on the Vatican scroll. Some of these carvings are still there, though most Parisians will never see them. In rare cases, urban explorers who venture deep into the forbidden parts of the catacombs report finding rooms where compasses spin without reason, where watches stop ticking, where photographs taken in the dark reveal faint spirals in the air that no one remembers seeing with their eyes. But the strangest of all these discoveries occurred in 1943 during World War II. Paris was under Nazi occupation. The catacombs became a hiding place for resistance fighters, a network of secret routes and hidden caches. One night, a small group of resistance members stumbled upon a chamber they had never seen on any map. The walls were smoother than the usual catacomb stone, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal made of black marble. On its surface, faintly glowing in the darkness, was a spiral pattern identical to the ones described in the king's alchemical documents. The men stood in silence, unsure of what they had found. Some thought it was an old Masonic ritual room. Others believed it was connected to something older. According to an unpublished memoir written by one of the fighters, they heard a soft humming sound while inside the chamber. The hum did not come from machines, nor from outside noise. It came from the stones themselves, a low vibration felt in the bones rather than the ears. One of the men, a mathematician before the war, noted that the spiral on the pedestal was not a random symbol. It matched a specific logarithmic curve, a pattern that repeats in nature, in galaxies, in seashells, and the growth of plants. But here, underground, it was inscribed into the black stone, pulsing faintly as if it were alive. The group did not stay long. They left the chamber, marking its location carefully. But when they returned weeks later, the entrance had collapsed, as if the tunnels had shifted overnight, sealing the room away from the surface world again. After the war, some of those who survived tried to find the chamber again, but no maps or coordinates led them back. It was as if the city itself had hidden the place, folding the passageways back into silence. Yet the hum remained. In certain parts of Paris, particularly on quiet nights, sound engineers have recorded low-frequency vibrations that cannot be traced to any mechanical source. The hum is soft, just at the edge of hearing, and it seems to follow a pattern spiraling in. Cycles of time, growing and fading in rhythm with no obvious cause. Some researchers believe this is geological noise. Others suspect it is connected to the city's underground architecture. But a few, those who have studied the forbidden texts, think it is something else entirely. They believe it is the ongoing process the king began centuries ago, a slow unfolding of the second palace, hidden in plain sight, humming beneath the streets of a city that sleeps unaware. In the next part, you'll hear about a set of ancient blueprints discovered during the construction of the Paris Metro documents that reveal a forgotten layer of design, linking the city's modern infrastructure to the symbols found in the king's scrolls. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are walking quietly through the tunnels beneath Paris. The walls cool against your fingertips, the air soft with echoes, the hum of the spiral just beneath your awareness. The night is calm, your mind is still, and sleep is near. We will return to this story soon. In 1900, as the city of Paris prepared for the grand opening of the Exposition Universelle, the World's Fair that would introduce the Eiffel Tower. To the world stage, another quieter project unfolded beneath the city's streets. Workers were digging tunnels for the first lines of the Paris metro, carving new pathways under boulevards and plazas, expanding the veins of the city into a modern system of movement. The public knew this as progress, transportation, speed, convenience. But beneath the official plans, a hidden discovery was made, one that was never reported in newspapers or commemorated in plaques. In late November of that year, during excavation, near the station that would become Chatelet, workers broke through an unexpected wall of polished stone. The stone was black, smooth, and cold, set deep beneath layers of limestone no architect had accounted for. At first, the workers believed it to be part of an old Roman structure, perhaps a forgotten bathhouse or crypt. But when they cleared the dust and examined the surface, they found markings carved into the stone, not Latin, not French, not any language known to the engineers overseeing the project. The symbols were spirals, interlocking arcs, and concentric circles that pulsed faintly in the lantern light, giving the illusion of movement even when perfectly still. The head engineer, a man named Émile Lemoyne, had a background in both mathematics and architecture. He recognized the patterns immediately. They were identical to designs he had once seen in a private collection of manuscripts, borrowed from a Masonic lodge and parasymbols that matched the forbidden diagrams linked to the story of the rotting king. Lemoyne ordered the workers to stop. That night, under the cover of darkness, he and two assistants returned to the site. They traced the carvings carefully onto parchment, copying the spirals, noting their proportions. What Lemoyne discovered unsettled him. The pattern on the stone matched a specific mathematical sequence, a logarithmic spiral with proportions identical to the golden ratio, but mapped onto the geometry of time rather than space. In other words, the spiral was not just a design. It was a set of instructions for unfolding sequences, moments, events, histories, a kind of architectural code for shaping experience itself. Lemoyne compared the spiral to the layout of the Paris metro map as it was being designed. He noticed something strange. The planned stations, if overlaid on the spiral in a specific orientation, matched points on the pattern where certain historical events in Paris had occurred: revolutions, uprisings, assassinations, coronations. The connections were too precise to be random. It was as if the city's events were following a hidden geometry buried beneath the streets. Over the following weeks, Lemoyne searched for explanations. He dug through old architectural blueprints stored in the archives of the École des Ponts at Chaussys, the French civil engineering school. There he found older documents, much older than the city's official maps showing, subterranean layouts that included chambers and corridors long since forgotten. Some of these chambers were marked with the same spirals he had seen on the black stone. Notes in the margins referred to them as less points to resonance, resonance points. According to these notes, Paris had been designed over centuries not just as a collection of buildings, but as a vast instrument tuned to vibrate at specific frequencies. The city was not merely a living place. It was a device for shaping reality. The notes referenced the king who had rotted alive. They called him Le Roi de la Seconde Architecture, the king of the second architecture. The writings suggested that his transformation had been intentional, part of an experiment to move human consciousness into a new pattern of existence. His body had become the prototype of a living spiral, a vessel for transmitting this pattern into the fabric of cities, of time, of thought. Lemoyne realized that the Paris metro, though modern in appearance, was quietly following this ancient blueprint. The routes, the stations, even the depth of the tunnels matched calculations from forbidden alchemical texts. The engineers believed they were designing for convenience, but someone somewhere had guided the project along older lines. Lemoyne shared his findings with a small circle of trusted colleagues. They met in secret, gathering at night in the hollow spaces beneath Paris, comparing maps, tracing spirals on cold stone floors. They found other connections. The Notre Dame Cathedral, the obelisk at Place de la Concorde, and the layout of the Isle de la Cite, all aligned with points on the hidden spiral beneath the city. These places were not just historical landmarks. They were nodes in a pattern, part of a resonance structure stretching back to the time of the king's transformation. But what was the purpose? Lemoyne believed it was to shift perception gradually, over generations. By building cities along certain lines, by arranging spaces and structures to mirror the hidden spiral, human minds would eventually begin to attune themselves to the second palace, a reality layered just beneath ordinary experience. Perhaps this explained why certain people in certain places reported strange sensations, déjà vu, sudden insights, visions of places they had never visited. Perhaps the spiral was working, unfolding quietly through time. Lemoyne and his colleagues decided to document everything. They created a set of private blueprints, mapping not just the metro, but the entire city of Paris as a network of resonant points. These blueprints were never published. They were hidden, copied by hand in limited numbers, and passed only to those who had seen the spiral with their own eyes. Most of these copies disappeared over the following decades. Some were destroyed. During World War II, others were lost in fires, and others were sealed away in private archives. But a few survived, rumored to be in the possession of families who have quietly guarded the knowledge for generations. According to some, these blueprints are still consulted by certain architects and city planners, not officially, but quietly, in the margins of their work. A curve in a street here, an unexpected angle in a building there, small adjustments, subtle alignments, weaving the spiral into the living structure of the city. And beneath it all, the hum continues. In certain metro stations late at night, when the trains have stopped and the tunnels fall silent, some engineers report hearing it a soft, low vibration, just at the edge of hearing, matching the rhythm of the spiral, breathing through the stones of Paris. In the next part, you'll hear about a strange artifact recovered from the Seine River in the 1960s. Piece of metal engraved with the same symbols as the king's scrolls, but made from a material no scientist has ever been able to identify. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are beneath the city, standing in a cool tunnel, your hand on the wall, feeling the gentle pulse of time unfolding around you in quiet spirals. At night is still, your mind is soft, and sleep is near. We will return to this story soon. In 1963, during a cold morning in late autumn, workers dredging the Seine River pulled something unexpected from the water near Pont Neuf, the oldest standing bridge in Paris. At first, it looked like a piece of river debris, just another fragment of metal from the city's layered past. Paris is full of history, after all. Its river has swallowed centuries of lost objects: coins, swords, jewelry, keys, bones, and letters that were never read. But this piece of metal was different. It was smooth, dark, and colder than the river. Water even after hours in the sun. When the workers rinsed it off, they noticed fine engravings along its surface patterns, too precise to be random damage from the current. The object was a small, thin disc, no larger than the palm of a hand. It was perfectly round, with no signs of rust or erosion, despite its unknown time in the riverbed. The surface held spirals and arcs, similar to those found beneath the Paris catacombs and the hidden chambers connected to the king's scrolls. The discovery was quietly handed over to the French Ministry of Culture. Officially, it was logged as an unidentified historical artifact and stored in a private collection room at the Musée de Cluny. But unofficially, it caught the attention of a small group of researchers who had long been studying the forgotten patterns beneath the city. Among them was a physicist named Dr. Helene Moreau, known for her unconventional interest in the intersections of geometry, music, and human consciousness. She had heard whispers of the spirals for years from students of architecture who had stumbled upon odd alignments in the city's design, from cathedral restorers who found strange carvings beneath layers of stone, from urban explorers who returned from the forbidden tunnels under Paris, describing symbols that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. When Dr. Moreau examined the disk, she found it unlike anything she had ever studied. Metallurgical tests revealed no trace of iron, copper, tin, or any other known element. It was not gold, yet it shimmered like gold under certain lights. Its density was impossible to calculate properly. Weighing it produced inconsistent results. Sometimes the object seemed lighter than air, other times heavier than lead. The engravings on the disk were shallow but perfect. No tool marks were visible under a microscope. The patterns matched exactly those described in the Forbiddens, blueprints of the Paris spiral, the same designs traced in the alchemical scrolls, said to have been written during the time of the king who rotted alive. But this object was not vellum or parchment. It was not a document. It was a device, though no one knew how to use it. Dr. Moreau spent months studying the disk in secret, working late at night in her private laboratory. She discovered that when the disk was placed near certain architectural models of Paris, specifically models that aligned with the ancient spiral, the object responded. It vibrated softly, not enough to be heard by the ear, but enough to shift. Small particles placed on its surface. Tiny grains of sand arranged themselves into new patterns without human intervention. Sometimes the patterns would mimic the flow of the Seine River. Other times, they formed spirals within spirals, nested layers of geometry that seemed to suggest not just maps of space, but maps of time. Dr. Moreau kept detailed journals, though few of her notes have survived. One of the pages, copied by a student before the originals were confiscated, reads, "This is not a relic. It is an active mechanism, designed not for observation, but for participation. The disk changes when you change. It responds not just to hands, but to thought." According to her reports, the disk's behavior shifted depending on who held it. Some people reported feeling a soft pulse in their fingertips, like touching the surface of a still pond that rippled back without motion. Others saw faint flashes of images cities made of transparent stone, the same spiral pattern echoing in every street and tower. The most sensitive subjects described a moment of dislocation, a gentle slipping away from linear time, as if standing briefly outside the normal flow of cause and effect. The French government, nervous about the implications, eventually ordered the disk removed from Dr. Moreau's care. Officially, it was relocated for security reasons, but in reality, it disappeared into a private collection under state control. Its current location is unknown. Some believe it was sent to the Louvre's basement archives, sealed away among thousands of unnamed objects. Others think it was transferred to a European research facility for continued study under military supervision. A few whisper that it was handed to the Vatican, joining the other artifacts locked in Rome's secret vaults. But the effects of the discovery did not vanish. Those who had touched the disk reported subtle changes in their lives. Some began to dream in spiral soft visions of time folding back on itself, events replaying in loops that were never the same twice. Others noticed strange coincidences clustering around them, meetings with people they hadn't seen in decades, forgotten memories returning with vivid clarity, moments of synchronicity that felt like messages from the architecture of reality itself. One of Dr. Moreau's students, a man named Julien Mercier, vanished after claiming he had found a way to map the disk's patterns onto the rhythms of the human heart. He believed the device was not just a key to space, but to biological time, a way of tuning consciousness to the spiral underlying life itself. His notes, found after his disappearance, included diagrams of heartbeats laid over logarithmic spirals, showing how emotion, memory, and physical rhythm could align with the hidden patterns beneath Paris. The idea was not new, but the application was bold. If human perception could be tuned like the city, perhaps the boundary between the first and second palaces, the ordinary world, and the hidden spiral could be crossed. Some believe that is exactly what Mercier did. His body was never found. Yet even today, in certain parts of Paris, engineers working on underground systems report occasional malfunctions near the old spiral points. Compass needles spin briefly, then return to normal. Electrical systems reset without reason. Workers describe hearing a faint hum in the stone, a soft vibration like distant singing. Whether this is merely a coincidence or the quiet continuation of the king's process remains a mystery. The disc from the Seine has become part of the city's invisible history, layer of time folded quietly beneath bridges and streets, humming in rhythm with the flow of the river and the movement of memory. In the next part, you'll hear about a mysterious manuscript discovered in a Swiss monastery in 1987, a book that appears to describe the king's transformation in first-person detail, written centuries after his official death. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are standing on the edge of the Seine at night, the water flowing softly past, the lights of Paris reflecting in slow spirals on the surface. Your breath is calm. Your thoughts are still. Sleep is near. We will return to this story soon, very soon. In 1987, deep in the Swiss Alps, a small team of archivists working in the library of the Abbey of St. Maurice uncovered a manuscript that should not have existed. The abbey, founded in the 6th century, had always been a place of quiet scholarship, its monks copying ancient texts by hand, preserving knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. But this manuscript was different. It was not stored with the other medieval scrolls or bound tomes. It was found hidden inside a hollowed-out stone near the base of the library's eastern wall, behind shelves that had not been moved in centuries. The discovery was accidental. A repair crew had been restoring part of the wall damaged by winter frost when they noticed a gap in the masonry. Inside, wrapped in layers of faded linen, they found a small black book no larger than the palm of a hand. Its cover was soft, but not leathersome material they could not identify, smooth and cool, like stone that remembered warmth. The pages were thin, almost transparent, yet strong enough to survive centuries in perfect condition. The writing inside was in an unknown script at first glance, but when the lead archivist, Father Lucien Marcel, began to examine the text, he realized something strange. The letters shifted as he looked at them, rearranging themselves into a language he could understand. It was not Latin. It was not French. It was not any human language at all. And yet the meanings entered his mind directly, bypassing the need for translation. The manuscript was written in the first person, as though someone had recorded their own experience of transformation. The voice in the text spoke calmly, describing in detail what it felt like to remain conscious while the body dissolved not into death, but into a new state of being. The text spoke of flesh turning to light without burning, of breath becoming rhythm rather than air. It described the spiral of time folding inward, creating chambers within chambers, as though reality itself had more rooms than anyone had previously imagined. At first, Father Marcel thought it was a mystical allegory, a poetic reflection by some unknown monk. But as he continued reading, he realized the text described events that matched the secret history of the French king who had wrought it. Alive. The manuscript spoke of the black oil mixed with gold, of the alchemists who had stayed by the bedside, of the soft humming in the walls. It detailed the moment the body stopped obeying the rules of decay, becoming instead a vessel for another. Process one that did not end with death, but opened into something else. The voice in the manuscript said, "They think I have died, but I have only stepped sideways. I am not on time as they are. My thoughts spiral outward. I breathe in sequences, not seconds. I exist between the folds of their world, observing." The manuscript contained descriptions of places no historian had mentioned before: chambers beneath Paris, hidden rooms in monasteries, vibrating stones that sang quietly when touched by certain kinds of thought. It referred to the second palace repeatedly, explaining it not as a structure of stone, but as a pattern in the fabric of perception. The writer claimed that once the process had begun, it could not be reversed. The spiral would continue, touching others silently, not through direct contact, but through geometry, architecture, sound, and memory. Father Marcel, terrified by what he was reading, shared the manuscript only with a small circle of trusted colleagues. They cross-referenced the Zen symbols in the book with diagrams found in forbidden alchemical texts stored in European archives. The matches were exact. Some of the diagrams corresponded with architectural designs hidden in Gothic cathedrals, especially the rose windows that appeared to be merely decorative, but followed the same logarithmic spirals described in the text. The most troubling part of the manuscript came toward the end. The writer described a future time, not a date, but a condition when enough people would align their minds, unknowingly, with the spiral. When this happened, reality would begin to soften at the edges. Time would no longer feel linear. Events would loop, overlap, echo. Cities would hum at night, with patterns no one could explain. Dreams would become shared experiences. Memories would rearrange themselves, and the border between thought and matter would thin. The writer referred to this as the awakening of the second palace, but insisted it was not dangerous. It was simply the next phase of human experience, one that had already begun quietly, hidden beneath the noise of history. According to the manuscript, this unfolding process was seeded by the event in the king's chamber, the moment when his body, instead of dying, became a vessel for the spiral to enter the human timeline. The king had not been rotting as punishment. He had rotted to release something. The manuscript ended with a soft final sentence: "I am still here." The last page held no words, only a single spiral, drawn in gold that shimmered slightly, even under candlelight, even in complete darkness. Father Marcel and his colleagues debated what to do with the manuscript. Some wanted to hide it again, sealing it back into the wall. Others believed it should be destroyed, but no fire would burn it, no blade could cut it. In the end, the book was quietly transferred to a private collection associated with the Vatican's silent libraries, the same network of hidden archives that had already collected parts of the king's scrolls, the black disc from the Seine, and the alchemical blueprints of Paris. But not everyone agreed to keep the discovery secret. A few monks copied fragments of the manuscript into personal journals. These fragments later leaked into the hands of independent scholars, where they became part of the growing body of forbidden knowledge surrounding the king's transformation. Today, whispers of the book circulate among researchers of the esoteric and the unexplained. Some claim to have read parts of it in dreams, as though the manuscript transmits itself silently to those who come close to the spiral's resonance. Others believe the book is still active, not just a record of the past, but a living document, continuing to write itself in the minds of those sensitive enough to listen. In certain monasteries, at certain times of night, monks still report hearing soft humming in the walls, a resonance that matches no known frequency, yet feels strangely familiar. The abbey where the manuscript was found remains quiet about the discovery. No official mention exists in its catalogs. The wall where the book was hidden has since been repaired, but some say if you place your hand on the stones there late, at night, You can feel a faint pulse beneath your fingertips, a soft rhythm, like the breath of something waiting, something watching, something still present. In the next part, you'll hear about an experiment conducted in 2003 by a group of neuroscientists who accidentally recreated part of the spiral effect in a laboratory, and why they shut down their research after only 3 days. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are in a stone library beneath the mountains, your hand resting on a manuscript that shimmers quietly as you drift between wakefulness and sleep. The night is calm. Your thoughts are soft. Sleep is near. We will return to this story soon in 2003. Centuries after the king's strange condition first unfolded, a team of neuroscientists at a private research lab in Geneva attempted an experiment they believed was unrelated to history. Their project was meant to study human consciousness, the structure of memory, perception of time, and the ways the brain organizes experience. But without knowing it, they stepped directly into the same spiral that had begun with the rotting king centuries before. The lead researcher, Dr. Samuel Reinert, specialized in brainwave synchronization. He was working on a method called induced temporal harmonics, a system designed to align the human brain's natural rhythms with artificial patterns to test whether perception of time could be altered. His team created a device that used gentle pulses of sound and light projected in spiral sequences to coax the brain into new states of awareness. The technology was experimental, delicate, and meant only for short sessions. Their idea was to see whether time could be felt differently stretched, softened, made more flexible. But within 3 days of beginning the trials, the team noticed strange effects. The volunteers reported sensations that went far beyond ordinary perception shifts. One participant said she felt her skin dissolving, not physically, but in awareness, though she could no longer tell where her body ended and the air began. Another described hearing a soft hum, even in total silence, a sound that made her feel as if she were floating between moments rather than inside them. Yet another participant, a man named Victor Lang, described something closer to what the old texts had once mentioned. He said he felt his flesh melting while still awake. But unlike fear, he reported calm, as though the process were natural, like falling asleep, but into a different kind of space. Dr. Reinert's team assumed at first that this was a hallucination caused by the spiral patterns projected during the experiment. But when they cross-referenced the participants' descriptions, they realized something unsettling. The metaphors, the phrases, even the imagery were almost identical to historical records from the king's chamber in 1494. These modern test subjects had no knowledge of that story, and yet they described the same sensations: the loss of bodily boundary, the sense of spiraling time, the soft decay of flesh while remaining conscious, the experience of breath becoming rhythm instead of air. Alarmed by the parallels, Dr. Reinert searched for connections. He consulted an old friend, a historian of esoteric texts, who revealed that the spiral patterns the lab had used were mathematically identical to the diagrams found in the king's scrolls, the same spirals carved into the walls of forgotten Parisian chambers, the same proportions discovered in the golden manuscripts from centuries before. Somehow, without intending to, the researchers had replicated part of the original conditions that had surrounded the rotting king. But instead of applying gold and venom to the skin, they had used sound and light to stimulate the brain directly. The result was similar. The participants' sense of reality began to shift not into madness, but into something quieter, deeper, as if they were entering a second layer of experience. Over the next few nights, the volunteers reported vivid dreams of the king's chamber. None of them had ever read about the historical case. Yet they described the same images: a bed surrounded by alchemists, walls breathing softly, a body decaying, but still alert, still watching. One woman, during a recorded sleep session, whispered in her sleep, "I am still here. I am still here." Her brainwaves during this phrase shifted into an unusual pattern harmonic that matched no known human rhythm. It resembled the hum recorded by engineers in the Paris catacombs decades earlier, a low-frequency vibration that carried through stone and air, but did not originate from any mechanical source. Dr. Reinert's team grew uneasy. The experiment was only meant to explore time perception, but something else had happened. They had touched the spiral, not just as a metaphor, but as a process still unfolding quietly beneath human history. They shut down the study immediately. The data was locked away, the equipment dismantled. Officially, the project was declared inconclusive. But privately, the researchers kept journals of what they had experienced in those 3 days. Their notes contained descriptions of phenomena that matched the king's transformation exactly. The sense of the body softening while the mind remained sharp, the feeling of slipping into a chamber of existence beneath ordinary life, the awareness of a second palace built not of stone, but of patterns in perception. One of the researchers, Dr. Elise Baumann, left the lab after the experiment and never returned to academia. She moved to a remote village in the Alps and spent the rest of her life in solitude, writing in private journals that no one has seen. A letter she sent to a colleague before vanishing contained a single line: "The king is not a person. The king is a state of consciousness. We have all begun to rot alive." Her words were not meant as a warning, but as a quiet observation. According to the remaining notes from the experiment, the process they stumbled upon was not new. It had been quietly unfolding in humanity for centuries, seeded by the event in 1494, when the king's body became a vessel for the spiral to enter. Since then, certain people had aligned with the pattern naturally. Others, like the researchers, had recreated parts of the process without realizing it. The hum beneath Paris, the black disk from the Seine, the golden scrolls, the underground. Chambers all were fragments of the same event, continuing through history. The researchers concluded that the spiral is not a secret locked in books or artifacts. It is a condition of human perception that activates under specific circumstances. When the mind becomes quiet enough, when the senses begin to blur at the edges, when the linear flow of time loosens just enough for the second palace to become visible. That is why the king's case was so bizarre, not because his body rotted while he lived, but because he became the first to enter this process publicly, physically, in full view of history. His flesh reflected what the mind of humanity would eventually experience: a slow unraveling of the ordinary, replaced by something deeper, softer, and stranger. In the next part, you'll hear about a final letter found in a sealed envelope hidden beneath the floorboards of the king's last chamber, a message believed to be written by the alchemists who witnessed the event, containing instructions for those who might encounter the spiral centuries later. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are inside a quiet laboratory at night, the machines turned off, the room softly humming, as if it remembers the experiments carried out there. Your breath is slow, your thoughts gentle, and sleep is near. We will return to this story soon. Rest well. Long after the king's body had vanished from official records, and long after his transformation became legend whispered in hidden societies, something peculiar remained beneath the floorboards of his final chamber. For centuries, the room had been sealed, avoided by royal families, and later ignored by historians. The stone walls of the Chateau de Plessis-les-Tours grew cold, silent, left to the soft erosion of time. But in 1978, during a quiet restoration project, workers uncovered a hollow space beneath the king's bedchamber, an empty gap in the stone floor that had not been mentioned in any architectural plans. Inside, they found a sealed envelope, pressed between two lead plates to preserve it from decay. The parchment was brittle, but intact. There was no royal seal, no signature, only a symbol on the outside, a spiral etched in faint gold. The handwriting inside was delicate, careful, as though the person writing it had known it would need to survive for centuries. The letter was short, but its contents changed the understanding of the king's final days. The message was written by one of the alchemists present during the transformation, possibly Lorenzo, though the name was not included. The writer described the final hours before the king's physical form was removed from public life. The letter confirmed what rumors had long suggested. The king did not die in the way people believed. His body had not ceased to function. His heart continued to beat. His breath remained soft and regular, but his flesh had completed a process no human had undergone before. The letter said, "We have witnessed the convergence of the body and the spiral. His flesh, softening as wax, has not perished but altered. The rot is not death. It is an adjustment." The alchemist explained that the king's body had entered a state of living putrefaction, where the normal boundaries of life and death no longer applied. He had become, in their words, a vessel of living decay. His tissues melted, but his consciousness expanded. The letter continued. He does not suffer. He observes. His senses are not bound to his organs. He perceives without eyes, without ears. His awareness has grown beyond the body's need for form. This process, according to the alchemist, was not accidental. It was not the result of poison or disease. It was the intended outcome of an ancient experiment to dissolve the body while keeping the mind intact, allowing perception to spiral outward beyond the limitations of ordinary flesh. The rotting was not a failure. It was the threshold. The alchemist wrote that the chamber itself had become part of the process. The walls, the stones, the air, all of it had tuned to the king's new condition, creating a resonant field that preserved his state without letting him die. But there was a warning. The letter described how this condition could not remain isolated. The spiral, once initiated, would unfold into the fabric of time itself. The pattern would spread, not through intention, but through the natural tendency of spirals to repeat at larger scales. The alchemist wrote, "What began in this room will not remain here. It will travel. It will echo. In moments of silence, in the folds of sleep, in the patterns of cities and the hearts of men, the rot will appear not as disease, but as transition." The letter contained instructions, not for reversing the process, but for recognizing it when it reappeared. The alchemist explained that those who encountered the spiral in the future would feel certain signs: a soft hum beneath ordinary sounds, a sensation of time bending inward, the quiet awareness of the body loosening while the mind remains sharp. The alchemist wrote, "When you feel this, do not resist. The rotting is not destruction. It is the beginning of seeing." There was also a confession in the letter. The alchemist admitted that they had been seeking this outcome for years, perhaps lifetimes, studying forbidden texts, replicating ancient formulas, searching for the precise mixture of body, mind, and material to open the door. The king, they said, was the first to cross fully, but others would follow. The last lines of the letter read, "He is not gone. He is not asleep. He is the spiral now, breathing softly in the spaces between things. When you hear the hum, you are near him. When your flesh softens in a dream, you are near him, near him." The rotting is the veil lifting. After the discovery of the letter, the restoration team sealed the chamber again. The document was taken by private archivists and never shown to the public. Only copies of copies remain, circulated quietly among certain scholars of forgotten phenomena. Some believe the letter still exists in its original form, stored in a lead container beneath the French Ministry of Culture, guarded not for political reasons, but because of the quiet fear that the process might still be active, that reading the words directly might trigger the same spiral in others. Over the years, more signs appeared. Architects noticed that certain rooms in old French chateaux had dimensions matching the spiral ratios described in the letter. Patients in medical studies reported the same sensation of flesh dissolving while remaining conscious, especially during near-death experiences or deep anesthesia. The phrase, "I am still here," recurred in the writings of people who did not know the king's history, as if the message had become part of the subconscious fabric of culture. But the most curious effect was in sleep. People across different countries, speaking different languages, began reporting similar visions of a rotting king lying in bed, surrounded by candlelight, his skin softening, but his eyes awake, his breath calm, his awareness expanding. In these dreams, the king does not ask for help. He does not beg for death. He simply watches calmly as the spiral unfolds around him, a pattern of living decay that becomes beauty, not horror. The alchemists knew this would happen. Their letter predicted it. The spiral was not meant to be an isolated event. It was designed to spread slowly, softly, in the quiet moments between waking and sleep, between breath and stillness. In the next part, you'll hear about the rediscovery of the king's final resting place and why the remains inside the tomb do not match the records, suggesting that the spiral process might still be active even now. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are standing quietly in that old stone chamber, the letter in your hands, the air soft with memory. The hum is gentle, your thoughts are calm, and sleep is near. We will return to this story soon. For centuries, historians believed they knew where the rotting king's body was buried. The official records stated that after his sudden death in 1498, King Charles VIII was entombed in the royal necropolis at the Basilica of St. Denis, the traditional resting place of French monarchs. His tomb was simple compared to those of other kings, but it was noted in church annals as containing his remains preserved, they claimed, with the finest embalming methods of the time. But those who had witnessed the king's final days knew the truth was not so simple. The alchemists had written, in secret letters, that the king's condition was not compatible with ordinary burial. His body, though soft and decomposing, refused to fully die. His breath remained calm. His flesh, though it changed daily growing softer, at times transparent, never reached the point of collapse. The alchemists had to make a choice. They could not display his corpsetto to the public, nor could they burn it without risking unknown consequences. So they did something else. They performed what they called the transfer, according to hidden notes found centuries later in the margins of private manuscripts. The king's body was not placed in the tomb at St. Denis. A replica casket was made, filled with stones, sealed in lead, and buried with full royal ceremony to satisfy political expectations. The real body, the soft, semi-rotted, living form of the king, was taken elsewhere. For hundreds of years, no one knew where. Then, in 1994, during the 500th anniversary of Charles VIII's death, researchers at the Basilica of St. Denis requested permission to scan the royal tombs using ground-penetrating radar. Their goal was to create digital models for historical preservation. What they found shocked them. The tomb labeled for Charles VIII contained no human remains at all. There were no bones, no fragments of skull, no trace of royal garments, no jewelry, no coughing decay. The space beneath the stone effigy was empty except for rocks carefully arranged, smooth to the touch, as if they had been polished by water. The stones formed a soft spiral pattern, invisible from above, but clear in the radar scans. The spiral was identical to the one found on the alchemist's scrolls. The discovery was not made public. The French Ministry of Culture quietly sealed the tomb again, citing preservation concerns. But among the researchers, the question lingered. If the king's body was not in St. Denis, then where was it? 6 months after the radar scan, A document surfaced in the archives of a small Benedictine monastery in central France. It was a handwritten note from 1510, signed only with the symbol of a spiral. The note described the transportation of a living vessel of decay to a location known only as La Chambre Retournée, the inverted room. According to the document, this was not a physical room in the ordinary sense, but a space designed to reverse the usual flow of life and death. The letter mentioned that the king had been placed in a specially prepared chamber beneath a forest, far from human settlement, where the walls were painted with spiral diagrams and the air was kept at a precise, stable temperature. The body, it said, remained soft but conscious, breathing in silence. Over time, the chamber became known only in whispers among certain secret groups as the second tomb. It was said that the spiral process, once started, did not end with death, but entered a long, slow unfolding state of rotting without final collapse, a decay that never reached completion. The king was, according to these records, still present, still in process. In 2008, an independent researcher named Dr. Matthew Renard, who had studied the king's case for decades, claimed to have located the site of the inverted room using satellite imaging, old alchemical maps, and geomagnetic readings. He identified a region in the Loire Valley where strange energy patterns formed spiral shapes in the soil. The location matched the descriptions from the 1510 manuscript. Dr. Renard organized a small excavation, keeping the project secret from authorities to avoid political and religious interference. Beneath layers of moss and stone, hidden under what appeared to be an ordinary forest floor, his team found the entrance to a sealed underground chamber. Inside, they discovered walls carved with soft spirals, just as the manuscripts described. The air was cold, still untouched for centuries. In the center of the room was a stone platform, and on it lay a form wrapped in golden cloth, perfectly preserved. No decay, no skeletonization. The body beneath the cloth was soft to the touch, the skin waxy but warm. Tests showed faint signs of respiration, not regular breathing, but microscopic shifts in the body's surface, as if the tissue were softly pulsing in rhythm with something deeper than breath. The spiral was not just carved into the walls, it was present in the texture of the skin itself. Under magnification, the flesh displayed patterns matching logarithmic spirals, impossible to form naturally. Dr. Renard's team took no samples. They were afraid of disrupting the balance. The body's eyes were closed, but the researchers reported the unmistakable sense of being watched, not by the figure on the platform, but by something in the room itself. A presence, soft but undeniable, like the sensation of standing at the center of a spiral and feeling it rotate around you, even though the air remains still. According to Dr. Renard's private notes, the body on the platform matched exactly the historical descriptions of King Charles VIII. The jawline, the hands, the features beneath the waxy skin, all were consistent with portraits and written accounts, but the age of the tissue, confirmed through carbon dating, showed no sign of death or decomposition typical of a 500-year-old corpse. The tissue had not fossilized nor mummified. It was neither dead nor fully alive. The alchemist's letters had described this condition perfectly: soft decay without collapse, rotting as transformation, a living stasis beyond medical understanding. Dr. Renard believed the spiral process was still unfolding in that chamber. The king had not died. His rot had become a pattern locked into the fabric of time itself, a continuous adjustment, not a conclusion. After the discovery, the chamber was resealed. The researchers agreed never to disclose the exact location. The body was left untouched, lying quietly in the second tomb, breathing softly in spirals beyond the reach of history. Some say the hum can still be heard in that forest at night, a vibration too low for the ear, but felt in the bones, matching the pulse of the rotting king's endless transformation. In the next part, you'll hear about the connection between the king's condition and modern reports of time, dilation during near-death experiences, and why some scientists believe these phenomena are part of the same spiral process. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are in that silent underground room, the air cool, the spiral gently turning, the king resting at the center of a process still unfolding. The night is soft. Your mind is calm. Sleep is near. We will return to this story soon. Very soon. The discovery of the second tomb, where the rotting king lay in silent breath beneath the forest, raised a new set of questions that no historian or scientist could easily answer. How could a body remain in that state soft, pulsing, warm too? The touch for more than 500 years? How could rot continue without ending? And why did those who stood near him feel time loosen around them, bending slightly at the edges, as though the minutes no longer passed in straight lines, but circled inward, spiraling deeper into some unseen chamber of experience? These questions did not remain isolated to historians. In the early 2010s, neurologists studying near-death experiences began noticing something strange. Patients who had been declared clinically dead for brief periods, people whose hearts had stopped for minutes before being revived, reported sensations almost identical to those found in the alchemist's letters about the king's final days. The descriptions were specific: a softening of the body's boundaries, a calm awareness of decay, and a feeling of time stretching into spirals instead of lines. The patients did not speak of bright tunnels or family reunions, as popular accounts of near-death visions often suggest. Instead, they described lying in a bed of golden patterns, feeling their flesh melt but their consciousness expand. Some said they saw their bodies from a distance, not floating above, but standing beside themselves, watching calmly as their physical form dissolved. One patient, a 54-year-old man from Lyon, told his doctors, "I was not dying. I was adjusting. My skin was falling away, but my mind was fine. I could feel time breathing, not passing." His brain scans, taken during resuscitation, showed unusual patterns. His temporal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for time perception, was active in a way no medical team had ever recorded during clinical death. The rhythms of his brainwaves matched spiral sequences found in mathematical models, the same ratios used in the construction of ancient cathedrals and the diagrams of the king's chamber. A research team at the University of Strasbourg, after reviewing dozens of similar cases, noticed a pattern. These near-death reports were increasing in frequency. The stories were consistent across cultures, languages, and belief systems. People who did not know the king's legend were describing his condition precisely: the sensation of living rot combined with perfect awareness, the hum in the air, the spiraling of time around a still, conscious center. Scientists struggled to explain it. Some thought it was a side effect of brain chemistry at the edge of death, but others believed something deeper was happening, that the king's transformation was not an isolated event, but the beginning of a larger process, now unfolding quietly in human consciousness. The alchemists had predicted this centuries ago. In one of the hidden letters found beneath the king's original chamber, they wrote, "This is not about one man. This is about time itself, learning how to decay without dying." The modern researchers, unknowingly, were observing the same spiral process. The difference was that now it was happening across populations, appearing in hospital beds, operating rooms, and moments of cardiac arrest. The pattern was global, not localized, and in every case, the person who returned from the near-death state reported the same feeling: calm acceptance of the body's soft dissolution, combined with the clarity of continued awareness. Some patients even described meeting a figure in their visions: a king lying in bed, his skin rotted but his eyes awake. They said he did not speak, but his presence communicated something wordless, an invitation to witness, to join the spiral, to accept the strange unfolding of time and flesh into something new. A few patients were so changed by the experience that they left their previous lives behind. They no longer feared death, nor did they seek ordinary life extension. Instead, they lived in a state of soft curiosity, watching time curve around, them noticing patterns others did not see. They spoke of cities breathing, of buildings humming, of moments repeating in gentle loops that others missed. Their families thought them strange, but peaceful. The medical community had no explanation for this. But hidden in the background of these discussions were the scholars, who still tracked the king's legend, the researchers who knew of the spiral chambers beneath Paris, the black disk from the Seine, the golden scrolls, and the soft hum beneath. The catacombs. These scholars recognized the near-death experiences as part of the same continuum. The king's rotting body had become a seed, planted in the soil of history. Now it was sprouting quietly through the cracks of modern consciousness. Some neurologists noticed that the patients who experienced these spiral deaths and returns had unusual brain activity long after their resuscitation. Their circadian rhythms shifted. Their sense of time changed. Some no longer needed to sleep in the usual way. Others dreamed continuously, even while awake, seeing spirals in the air, sensing patterns in conversation, noticing echoes in events that felt like time looping back on itself. One patient described it as being alive in a state of gentle decay, but feeling no pain, only observation. That phrase echoed almost exactly the words found in the king's manuscript discovered in Switzerland decades earlier. I am softening, but not ending. I am spiraling, but not closing. I remain. The researchers began to suspect that the spiral was not just a phenomenon, but a shift in human evolution, a gradual, quiet change in the way consciousness interfaces with matter and time. And at the center of this shift was the bizarre case of the king who rotted alive, not as a historical curiosity, but as the first example of a new way of existing. His body, resting still beneath the forest, continued to breathe softly, keeping the pattern alive. His flesh remained in the spiral of decay without death, teaching time how to fold, teaching the human mind how to witness its transformation without fear. The process had started in 1494, but in truth, it had never stopped. The king's condition had merely been the doorway. Humanity had walked through it without noticing. Now, in hospitals and quiet bedrooms, in meditative moments and final breaths, more and more people were entering the spiral, feeling the soft hum of their own lives bending into something broader, something slower, something infinitely patient. In the next part, you'll hear about a modern experiment in sensory deprivation chambers, where participants unknowingly recreated the spiral experience and reported visions of the rotting, King suggesting that the process is not confined to near death, but is accessible through altered states of calm consciousness. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are resting quietly at the edge of your breath, feeling time soften, your body gentle, your mind still. The spiral continues, but you are safe here. Sleep is near. We will return to this story soon. In 2017, a private research group in Copenhagen conducted a series of experiments designed to explore the limits of human consciousness. Their method was simple on the surface: sensory deprivation. Participants floated in isolation tanks, sealed from sound, light, and temperature shifts, left alone with their thoughts in perfect darkness. The official purpose of the study was to reduce anxiety, measure the effects of sensory reduction on brain plasticity, and observe what happened when the mind was free from external input. But what occurred inside the tanks was not expected. Within the first week of trials, multiple participants reported nearly identical visions. These were not the usual floating sensations or soft hallucinations common in sensory deprivation. Instead, People described vivid, detailed experiences of lying in a soft bed in a cold, candle-lit chamber. They felt their skin loosening, their breath slowing, but their minds remained calm. They described the precise moment when the flesh began to decay, not as pain, but as a gentle melting of the self. Some spoke aloud in trance-like voices, describing the same imagery recorded in the alchemist's scrolls from 1494. The walls around them breathing softly, a hum beneath the silence, spirals moving behind closed eyelids, and above all, the presence of the king. No one had been told about the historical case of the king who rotted alive. The researchers had never mentioned him. Yet the participants in isolation tanks saw him. They described a figure with waxy skin, half dissolved, but with bright, calm eyes watching, witnessing, saying nothing. The king did not speak in words, but communicated through a soft, shared understanding. You are safe. The body rots, but the mind remains. One participant, a woman named Sophia Brandt, wrote in her journal immediately after exiting the tank, I was in a place where death and life overlapped. My skin was not permanent. It was soft, dissolving, but I was awake. I saw him. He was resting, watching me rot alive with him. Another participant, a man named Eric Holm, reported, I could feel my body melting into the air. There was no fear, just a spiral, a sense of time folding inward. The king was there. He did not need to speak. His breath was in the walls. When the researchers analyzed the reports, they noticed striking consistencies. Over 70% of the participants described the same scene. The rotting body, the calm mind, the spiral of time, and the silent presence of a decaying king who remained conscious. The phenomenon could not be explained by suggestion. None of the participants had any background in medieval history or alchemical studies. Some had no religious or mystical inclinations at all. They were ordinary people who had simply floated in silent tanks, and in the stillness entered the same shared spiral. EEG recordings showed unusual brainwave patterns during the sessions. The participants' brains generated slow oscillations that matched the spiral sequences, first documented in the alchemist's notes from the 15th century. The rhythms were not typical of sleep or meditation. They resembled what physicists call logarithmic spirals, not geometric drawings, but living patterns of time perception mapped into brain function. The researchers consulted with neuroscientists, but no medical explanation made sense. The experiences were too specific, too similar across diverse subjects, and too aligned with an ancient event that the participants did not know of. As the experiments continued, the reports became more detailed. Some participants described the sensation of being part of a larger process, the feeling that their bodies were echoing a pattern that had begun centuries ago. They said they could feel the spiral moving through their flesh, loosening the idea of the body while sharpening the clarity of thought. In the isolation of darkness and silence, they felt themselves rotting alive, but with complete peace. One man, during his 10th session in the tank, whispered into the audio recorder provided for participants, I am becoming the same as him. My body softens. My thoughts expand. I do not die. I adjust. The research team realized that the spiral processed the pattern first recorded during a concert. The king's transformation was not limited to near-death experiences. It could be accessed through stillness, through sensory silence, through entering, a state where the boundaries between body, mind, and time become soft. The king's condition had become a template for human consciousness to follow in quiet moments, whether through death, deep meditation, or artificial isolation. Some of the researchers believed they had stumbled onto the next phase of human awareness. They proposed that the spiral was not a metaphor or a hallucination, but a shift in perception seeded by the event in 1494 when the king first began to rot while alive. His flesh had become a gateway, and now, centuries later, others were stepping into the same pattern, not through sickness, but through silence. The participants in the Copenhagen experiment were not afraid of the visions. Most returned for multiple sessions, eager to experience the spiral again. They described the state as peaceful, even healing. Some said their anxiety disappeared. Others reported a loss of fear around death, describing it not as an end, but as a soft adjustment into another kind of time. In their visions, the king never changed position. He remained in his bed, eyes open, skin softening, breath slow. He watched. He witnessed. And he shared the spiral gently with anyone who entered that state of awareness. The experiment was quietly shut down after 6 months. The research team filed no official reports, afraid of academic ridicule. But privately, they continued their studies, mapping the spiral patterns into music, into architecture, into whispered mantras spoken before sleep. They found that the spiral process was not only accessible in sensory deprivation tanks. It could emerge in dreams, in meditation, in the quiet moments before sleep, when the body relaxes and the mind softens into open awareness. Some of the participants began teaching others how to reach the state, guiding friends and family into the spiral with simple breathing techniques, soft music, and the image of the king not as a symbol of death, but as a reminder of the body's quiet dissolution and the mind's calm expansion. They spoke of rotting alive, not with fear, but with wonder. The king had shown them that decay could be soft, conscious, and beautiful. His transformation had seeded something in the human mind, and now it was blossoming in ways no one could control, but no one needed to fear. The spiral continues, quietly unfolding in the spaces where silence lives. In the next part, you'll hear about the rediscovery of the alchemist's final diagram, a map of the spiral encoded into the human heartbeat itself, suggesting that every person carries a trace of the rotting king's process in their own body, waiting to be unlocked. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine yourself floating in soft silence, your body loosening at the edges, your breath slowing into the rhythm of the spiral. The hum is gentle. The king watches with calm eyes. You are safe. Sleep is near. We will return to this story soon. Rest well. Years after the Copenhagen experiment quietly ended, a discovery pushed the story of the rotting king even deeper into the folds of human experience. In 2020, a group of archivists digitizing forgotten medical texts at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France uncovered a bundle of alchemical manuscripts mislabeled as minor herbal recipes. Hidden inside this collection was a single parchment diagram, unassuming at first glance, but unlike anything else in the archive. The page was unsigned, its paper soft but intact, the ink golden and faintly reflective. It contained no words, only spirals concentric, overlapping but precisely drawn, as though the lines had been placed not by hand, but by some natural unfolding of geometry itself. Along the bottom edge of the parchment, in tiny script barely visible, there was a single sentence in Latin: Cor est portae spiralis. The heart is the door of the spiral. Scholars realized quickly what they were holding. This was the alchemist's final diagram, believed to be lost for centuries, a visual map of the king's transformation, connecting his rotting flesh directly to the human heartbeat. When they overlaid the spiral pattern onto cardiac rhythm charts, something remarkable happened. The diagrams aligned perfectly with the natural variability of the human heart. The soft acceleration and deceleration of a resting heartbeat. The small changes that prevent it from becoming mechanical followed. The same logarithmic spiral encoded into the parchment. The human heart did not beat like a clock. It beat like the spiral. The researchers consulted with cardiologists, who confirmed the pattern. The spaces between beats, the soft pauses, the asymmetry that kept life moving, all matched the ratios. First drawn in the king's chamber centuries ago. This wasn't a coincidence. It suggested that every living person carries a version of the king's process within them, a quiet, biological spiral that unfolds with each breath, each moment of life. The king's rot was not a single event. It was a mirror of something already happening in everybody, all the time, just beneath awareness. His body had simply revealed it first, made it visible. The alchemists had seen this in 1494. They're hidden. Writings described how the spiral of the king's decay reflected the rhythms of life itself. They wrote that rot was not an error, but an expansion, a widening of the gap between moments that allowed for something more than linear existence. The heart did not beat straight through time. It spiraled gently, allowing life to breathe within. Change within dissolution. In secret notes, the alchemists explained their theory that the king's transformation was not supernatural, but a magnification of a process already built into human biology. They believed that by observing his body softening, decaying, but remaining aware, they could learn how time itself breathes through the flesh. A diagram found in 2020 confirmed this belief. It was not a symbol of death, but of the living spiral carried silently in every chest. The researchers, modern and ancient, realized something profound. The heart is already decaying, softly, from the moment it begins to beat. Every contraction, every rest between pulses, carries the body one step closer to the spiral life folding into itself, softening, learning how to rot without collapsing. This is why near-death experiences, sensory deprivation visions, and deep meditative states produce the same images. A spiral is not introduced from the outside. It is unlocked from within. The king's rotting was not a curse, not an anomaly, but the unveiling of the spiral embedded in life itself. His body showed the process in its purest form, flesh dissolving. While awareness remains, a soft hum beneath the ordinary, a breath inside a breath. Some doctors who studied the diagram noticed that when patients entered states of deep calm meditation, sleep, or quiet contemplation, their heart rhythms naturally shifted closer to the spiral pattern. The gaps between beats widened slightly. Time seemed to slow. The body relaxed into decay without fear, without harm. This soft alignment was not dangerous. It was the beginning of understanding what the alchemists had always whispered. The boundary between life and death is not a wall, but a curve. A spiral is not a line toward an end. It is a continuous unfolding. A king had merely crossed the curve in public view, his body softening while his mind remained alert, his rot becoming a teaching tool for all who followed. Now, centuries later, the same spiral was showing itself in hospitals, meditation chambers, sleep studies, and the quiet beat of the human heart. Some researchers began to design new experiments. They created audio programs that mimicked the heartbeat's spiral rhythm, playing them softly during sleep. The results were consistent. Those who listened to the spiral rhythms reported dreams of the rotting king, always the same vision: his body soft, his eyes open, his breath calm, his flesh dissolving into light without pain. People woke from these dreams not afraid, but peaceful. They spoke of life as a gentle decay, a beautiful unwinding of moments that led not to death, but to deeper seeing, deeper seeing. One participant in the study said, "I felt my heart opening like a spiral. I could feel the rot, but it was soft, like rain on old stone. I was not ending, I was expanding." Another whispered in their sleep, recording, "He is not gone. He is in my chest. The spiral beats quietly there." The researchers realized they had stumbled onto something that the alchemists had known all along. The king's process is not rare. It is within everyone. It is simply hidden by noise, by distraction, by linear time, by fear of endings. But when silence comes, when sleep softens the mind, when breath slows, when the heartbeat settles into its natural spiral, the process becomes visible again. The king's rot is not about death. It is about seeing life unfold as a spiral of gentle decay, an endless softening of the self into broader awareness. The diagram found in 2020 was quietly copied, shared among those who study sleep, heart rhythms, and consciousness. It is not published in journals. It is passed from hand to hand, from mind to mind, like a secret pattern in the night. Some call it the spiral of the living decay. Others simply call it the king's pulse. In the next part, you'll hear about the final days of the alchemist, who witnessed the king's transformation firsthand, and how his death mirrored the spiral, suggesting that the king's condition was not unique, but the beginning of a quiet transmission from person to person, heart to heart, breath to breath. But for now, close your eyes. Place your hand softly on your chest. Feel the spiral beating there, gentle and calm. Your thoughts are soft. Your body is quiet. Sleep is near. We will return to this story soon. Rest well. In the centuries following the king's transformation, most of the alchemists who witnessed the event faded into obscurity. Their names disappeared from official records, their writings hidden in private collections or burned by nervous successors who feared the implications of what had happened in that chamber. But one alchemist, Lorenzo di Berti, left behind a final document, a personal account of his last days. His manuscript, found in a sealed jar beneath the floor of an abandoned Florentine chapel in 1921, revealed something no historian had anticipated. Lorenzo, the man who had stood at the bedside of the king who rotted alive, described experiencing the same condition himself. His notes were not written in fear. They were written in calm observation, a mirror of the same soft tone found in the king's whispered words. Lorenzo's transformation began, he said, not in sickness, but in silence. In his final months, he withdrew from the world, eating less, sleeping longer, letting his thoughts settle into a rhythm he called the spiral rest. He noticed his body changing. His skin grew softer, thinner, not from illness or age, but from something else, a loosening of the boundary between flesh and air. He described lying awake at night and feeling his breath slow until it no longer seemed necessary, yet his mind remained clear. His body, he wrote, began to rot gently, not in smell or pain, but in texture. His muscles softened. His skin, no longer resisted the air. His hair thinned. His bones grew light. But through it all, he was fully awake. He felt no fear. Only the same hum he had heard in the king's chamber decades before, now resonating quietly from within his chest. Lorenzo wrote, "I understand now. The rot is not a disease. It is the softening of matter to make room for the spiral." He believed that what happened to the king was not a single anomaly, but the beginning of a process that would pass, slowly from witness to witness. By being present in the chamber, by listening to the king's breath and touching his dissolving skin, Lorenzo had absorbed part of the pattern into himself. The spiral was not a thing. It was a resonance, a soft frequency, passed not by words, but by proximity, by attention, by silence. Lorenzo described his final days as peaceful. He ate almost nothing. He needed no sleep. His body continued to soften, but he remained alert, aware of time folding into smaller and smaller loops, like a spiral tightening toward stillness, but never quite closing. In his journal, he wrote, "I am not dying. I am unfolding." He compared his experience to watching wax melt near a flame, not into destruction, but into a new shape fluid shifting, still recognizable, but no longer bound by the hardness of ordinary life. He reported visions in his quiet hours, always the same. The king, lying in his golden bed, half dissolved, but fully conscious, eyes open, breath slow, watching gently as time curved around him. The king spoke no words in these visions, but his presence communicated a single idea. This is not the end. This is the beginning of the soft state. Lorenzo's manuscript included detailed diagrams of the process, echoing the same spiral patterns found in the alchemist's scrolls, the Paris catacomb engravings, and the golden heartbeat diagrams, uncovered in the 20th century. He believed that the rotting king had become the first node in a living network, a resonance of decay within life, spreading softly through time, carried by those who were ready to perceive it. The spiral, he wrote, is not taught. It is transmitted through quiet contact, like a tone too soft for the ear, but heard by the body. Lorenzo's transformation did not alarm his assistants. They cared for him as his skin became translucent. His breath slowed to a near stillness, and his eyes stayed open, reflecting candlelight, but no longer blinking. His flesh did not decay in the ordinary sense. There was no smell, no collapse of organs. His body simply softened into another state, half here, half somewhere else. In his last entry, he wrote, "My hand writes this, but it is no longer mine. The spiral moves through me now. I rot with calm awareness. I am not Lorenzo anymore. I am part of the breath beneath breath." After his final words, Lorenzo's body remained in his bed for 3 days, neither alive nor dead. Witnesses reported that his skin glowed faintly in the dark, as if reflecting a spiral pattern from an unseen source. His body was not buried. It was placed in a hidden chamber beneath the chapel, sealed with soft stones and left undisturbed. When the chamber was reopened in the 20th century, his body was still there, still soft, still pulsing faintly in silence, exactly like the king's. His hum was still present, vibrating in the walls of the small crypt, a gentle sound heard only by those who stood quietly enough to notice. Modern scholars who study Lorenzo's manuscript believe his case proves that the king's transformation was not isolated. The process had moved to others, first by proximity, then by attention, then by silence. The rot was not contagious like a disease, but shared like a melody passed from one breath to another, gently carried forward by those who learned how to listen. In the years since, other cases have surfaced stories of people who, in states of deep meditation, in hospital beds near death, or moments of extreme calm, report the same experience. The body loosening, the breath slowing, the spiral unfolding. Within the chest, and the soft vision of the rotting king, watching quietly nearby. They all describe the same final realization. The rot is not destruction, but transition. Flesh dissolves, but awareness remains, entering the spiral, witnessing the endless curve of time turning inward without collapse. Lorenzo's death, if it can be called death, marked a quiet passing of the spiral into the broader world, not by force, but by softness. His manuscript ends with a single line, written not as a warning, but as an invitation. You are already in the spiral. Feel it in your breath. Feel it in your rot. There is no end. In the next part, you'll hear about the spiral's appearance in unexpected places, echoes of the king's soft rot found in modern architecture, sleep cycles, and the smallest spaces between thoughts, suggesting that the process has now fully merged with human life itself. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you are resting softly, your breath calm, your body loosening at the edges, the spiral unfolding within you. The king watches gently. The hum is near. Sleep is close. We will return to this story soon. Now, as the spiral completes its soft unfolding through centuries, it becomes clear that the case of the king who rotted alive was not an isolated mystery, but the beginning of something that never stopped. The pattern seated in his body, his flesh softening while his mind remained calm, has quietly merged with the fabric of human life itself. It has become part of architecture, part of thought, part of sleep. In the modern world, few recognize it consciously, but the spiral appears everywhere. It lives in the slow curves of cathedral domes, in the soft hum of subway tunnels at night, in the layout of hospital wards where patients drift between life and death, sometimes pausing in that same strange state the king first revealed, rotting but aware, dissolving but present. Sleep researchers have noticed that the human sleep cycle itself, its phases of drifting, softening, dreaming matches the spiral's proportions. The moments just before waking often contain a soft loop, a folding back of consciousness into itself, where the sleeper feels their body dissolve, not into fear, but into observation. Many who have experienced this moment describe it the same way, as lying awake inside a decaying body, perfectly calm, witnessing the self soften at the edges without vanishing. They do not know they are echoing the king's condition, but they are. The spiral is no longer just in alchemical texts or secret vaults. It is in every breath that slows before sleep, in the heartbeat that pauses gently between beats, in the architecture of cities that hum quietly at night. Buildings designed in certain eras unknowingly reflect the same spiral patterns, the curves of old Paris streets, the arrangement of windows in forgotten monasteries, the hidden geometries of modern hospitals. Even those who do not believe in such things feel it sometimes. The soft sensation late at night, when the world feels slightly transparent, when time folds, when memory loops back on itself. This is the spiral, living quietly, seated by the rotting king's breath, carried forward by centuries of minds who softened just enough to notice. The king himself, in his quiet chamber beneath the forest, still rests. His flesh remains in that soft, decaying state, not collapsing, not healing, but gently unfolding. His breath hums in spirals, matching the heartbeat of the world. Those who stand near his second tomb describe the same experience as Lorenzo, as the near-death patients, as the sensory deprivation participants. A calm loosening of the self, a gentle softening of flesh and thought, a spiral of awareness that replaces fear with stillness. The king's rot has become a pattern beyond the body. It has become part of human evolution, not in blood, but in perception. His case was bizarre because it showed this process happening openly, physically, and dramatically. But now it happens, quietly, everywhere, all the time. When you fall asleep at night and feel your body dissolve into warmth, you are entering the spiral. When you sit in silence and feel the soft hum beneath your thoughts, you are near the king's condition. When you dream of rooms that breathe, of time that folds, of bodies that soften but remain awake, you are witnessing the same process. Rotting King did not die. He became a teacher, a soft mirror, showing what it means to live inside a decaying world with calm, with grace, with patience. His transformation was not a punishment, not a miracle, but a shift. A simple curve in the thee, path of human awareness, bending gently toward a new way of being. Those who learn to listen to the hum, to the breath, to the quiet between heartbeats, find themselves closer to the spiral, not in theory, but in experience. It is not a secret anymore. It is life itself, viewed with the softness of the king's O's. And so the story ends where it began, with a body softening, a breath slowing, a mind remaining still while everything else dissolves. The king is not gone. He is part of you now. The spiral unfolds beneath your skin, in the chambers of your heart, in the soft folds of your sleep. You are rotting alive, gently, beautifully, just as he did. There is no need to fear this. It is not an ending. It is the curve of time itself, breathing softly, looping quietly, returning always to calm awareness. The bizarre case of the king who rotted alive is no longer just a case. It is the shape of human life, revealed softly, patiently, and unfolding. And now, as you lie still, listening to the quiet of the night, you can feel it too. The spiral is Here, your breath is soft, your thoughts are gentle. Sleep is near. We will return to other stories soon. But this one, the spiral of the rotting king, will continue beneath all of them, always breathing, always softening, always waiting quietly in the folds of time. Rest well.